Good morning. This meeting is now called to order at 9 a.m. We'll now have a moment of silence, silent reflection, or silent prayer. Thank you. Supervisor Villaputo, will you please lead us in the pledge this morning? Thank you. And for the record, this is the Board of Supervisors regular meeting of November 3rd, 2020. Will the clerk please call the roll?
Supervisor Villaputo.
Present.
Supervisor Patty.
Here.
Supervisor Nguyen.
Here.
Supervisor Elliott.
Here.
Chair Miller.
Here. Thank you. We're going to move on now to recognitions and presentations. First up, we have a proclamation of November 2020 as National Caregiver Appreciation Month in San Joaquin County. I'd like to ask the clerk of the board to introduce the item and read the recognition.
Thank you, Madam Chair. The proclamation reads as follows. Whereas November is proclaimed National Caregiver Appreciation Month, Healings in Motion and Human Services Agency, Department of Aging, will present the 13th Annual Inner Safari Caregiver Conference on November 7th, 2020, to recognize the valuable contributions paid and unpaid caregivers make to the continuum of healthcare in San Joaquin County. And whereas, according to the U.S. Census, Americans aged 60 and older are projected to double in the next 4 decades and live an additional 19.4 years, from 49.2 million to 98 million in 2060. And people 85 and over is projected to rise from 6.4 million to 19.4 million in 2040, a 129% increase. More people are living longer, but living with chronic disease and disabilities, and caregivers play a vital role to continuum of care. And whereas the average age of a caregiver is 47 years old, and many family caregivers are not trained and juggle work and other responsibilities for their immediate family, often forgetting to care for themselves. And whereas resources and services available to assist caregivers may not be known by caregivers and their families, and whereas a special day of appreciation was started by Healings in Motion 13 years ago to show appreciation to all those who unselfishly care for someone in need. The Inner Safari Caregiver Conference provides a day of speakers, resources, workshops, demonstrations, and pampering for caregivers to show appreciation and to recognize the important role caregivers play in our community. Now, therefore, be it resolved that the San Joaquin County Board of Supervisors does hereby proclaim November 2020 as Caregiver Appreciation Month in San Joaquin County and encourages all citizens to honor the selfless service and the importance of caregivers throughout San Joaquin County, presented this 3rd day of November 2020. And through the chair, I believe that we do have Mary Nicholson from Healings in Motions available telephonically to participate in today's meeting.
Great. Mary, are you on the line? We'll see if we can get Mary unmuted. We're also used to seeing Mary.
Ms. Nicholson, are you able to hear us in board chambers?
Okay, I think we'll go ahead with board comments, and then if we're able to get Ms. Nicholson unmuted, we'll hear from her at a later time. Supervisor Villaputo?
Yes.
You have some comments?
You know what, I'm glad we're recognizing this event. My mom was a caregiver, and what they do on an everyday, day-to-day basis is unbelievable. And thank you for all the caregivers who are taking care of our senior citizens and for those who are handicapped and so forth. Thank you.
Thank you. Supervisor Patty?
Yes, thank you. I would Absolutely recommend and appreciate, sorry, not recommend, but recognize and appreciate the contribution. We have thousands of people that are in need of care. We have in-home support services that we've had a chance to get to know and meet over the years, and they do a phenomenal job helping our seniors and those in need. And I think this recognition is wonderful. I've had a chance to work with Chaka, a friend of mine that served food to those days where they're kind of recognizing and pampering them. I had a chance to meet dozens and dozens of these caretakers, and they're wonderful people doing a great service for many people. Thank you.
Supervisor Wynn?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Having participated as a caregiver with my mother, it is a rewarding but very challenging experience. I don't think a lot of people understand how much time and effort it takes to help someone who can't help themselves. So I truly appreciate all the caregivers out there, because I personally know the efforts that they make in regards to making their loved ones safer and certainly better able to live the rest of their lives. So congratulations to them and thank them for their efforts.
Thank you. Supervisor Elliott?
Thank you, Chair. Yes, we all appreciate the very important role that caregivers play throughout the county and all of the cities, and just throughout society in general. So it's entirely appropriate, and I certainly add my appreciation as well. And thanks for the important role that our caregivers play. And also, I want to add my thanks to the group Healings in Motion for their efforts in support of providing that caregiving. So thank you for all you do.
Yeah, and I will echo my colleagues. As Supervisor Wynn said, I have also been a participant in caring during my dad's final months, and it is very rewarding, but it is very, very challenging. And for all of those who are currently engaged in it, we all recognize your efforts and thank you for what you provide, not only to your own family, but to our communities. So very pleased to proclaim November 2020 as National Caregiver Appreciation Month here in our county. And many thanks to Mary Nicholson and Healings in Motion for all of the work of yourself and your organization over the last many years to provide services to the caregivers in San Joaquin County. I'll ask one final time if we've been able to hear from Mary Nicholson online, and if not, then we'll move on.
Madam Chair, I'm not sure that I see her number on the call at this time.
Okay,
so
great.
I have reached out to her via email. Hopefully she'll be able to respond and be able to get some comments from her.
Okay,
I know this
great.
was important to her.
Thank you so much. Then we will move on to a presentation by the Housing Authority of San Joaquin County in collaboration with Behavioral Health Services regarding the Crossways Residences grand opening. Presenting today, we have our Housing Authority Director, Peter Ragsdale, and our Behavioral Health Director, Tony Vartan. Welcome, gentlemen.
In person. We did a short video which will give you an idea of what the property will look like inside the first building at 448 Center Street in Stockton. We have a little bit of an introduction with one of our residents, and we're excited. The second building will complete in December, and the final building in March. And what I was thinking, these units individually seem like small accomplishments in the sense that 15 apartments does not solve homelessness, does not solve the need for housing for people with significant mental health issues. But cumulatively, it starts to be incremental, and the first 40 units and another 40 units and another 40 units really start to make a difference in getting people under roofs. So we're excited, and we're very proud of our partnership with Behavioral Health.
Thank you. Good morning, Madam Chair, Ms. Monica Nino, members of the board. Thank you to our partnership with Housing Authority and Mr. Peter Ragsdale. As you know, the project came together using MHSA dollars to do this project-based housing, and I can tell you that we're proud of the outcome and what we have accomplished. We are hoping to continue to grow and expand this project in order to make more housing units available for our mentally ill population. And as you know, these units are dedicated to mental health patients for the next 20 years with vouchers attached to them. So we thank you, Housing Authority, for the partnership, and we continue to work on this. We would like to share at this point a short video as a mean to do the ribbon cutting, as we are not able to do that due to COVID. But it will give you a little bit of a highlight about the project as well as an inside look of one of the units. So if the video is ready, we can move forward with that. Thanks. And as they get in the video ready, I can make comment that it's just the link that they will be clicking on. We continue to look at how best we can serve the segment of population that is homeless and has some sort of behavioral health need. And with that, we are currently working on a couple other projects. Particularly, we're looking at an innovation project that will give us sort of a transitional capability for individuals that may be otherwise finding themselves in homeless shelters with the mental illness. So we have made some attempts for some grants, and hopefully if that works out, then we will attach that to our innovation projects with MHSA dollars, and we'll be able to really continue completing the continuum of services that we need for the homeless behavioral health patients.
And I would also make that point that for folks that are in tenancy a year in these units, after a period of stability, if there's a different community people choose to live in, they can request a tenant-based voucher that frees up an apartment for somebody that's transitioning from a program that where there's more structure and on-site services, et cetera. So there's really an escalator out, and I think practically that investment of bricks and sticks to produce units allows someone to transition to a different community, a different environment, but it's not, hey, well, you've gotten this apartment and then sort of no further. So from that standpoint, there's an ability to transition from another behavioral health program into one of these apartments, and then there's an opportunity to leave.
Are we working or are we ready?
We're still working out, but we'll have it up shortly.
During the years that the Homeless Task Force was in operation, a lot of interesting partnerships and collaborations sort of formed on their own organically. Different people would discuss something that a segment of the homeless population that they were wanting to address. Somebody else would speak up and say, we've been wanting to do that as well. But I think one of the most powerful collaborations that emerged from that task force is represented by these two gentlemen here today, the Housing Authority of San Joaquin and San Joaquin County, especially with our behavioral health services. We are involved in some partnering on some really exciting projects here in San Joaquin County, and it's in no small part due to these two gentlemen, their willingness to sort of think outside the box and to see potential for coming up with projects and housing, permanent supportive housing, in a way that would really make a lasting, not just move the needle for now, but really make a lasting impact on homelessness in San Joaquin County. This is one of those projects, and there's many more. I mean, when they're very modest about talking about, oh, well, we sort of have this on the horizon or that on the horizon, but there are some very big and exciting programs that are in the works. And It is really exciting to see this today. I wish we could be there with the giant scissors to cut the ribbon, but we're going to have a video right now. So, and this is right in our backyard. This is just a couple blocks away from here.
Into affordable housing, permanent supportive housing, and there's investment in this neighborhood. And we're happy to be part of seeing buildings being repurposed and obviously beautified, that we have an opportunity to take a building that just had started to look tired and bring it back to life.
And with that, a unique partnership formed between Housing Authority County of San Joaquin and San Joaquin County Behavioral Health Services to shelter and assist those living with mental health issues. It promises a new chance at life for some of our most vulnerable.
This is a success story for all of us as a community. This is something that often people may think about and turn their head away and say, well, how are we going to accomplish this? Or if we do accomplish, how are we going to sustain that? And what happened here was the community came together and actually come up with fully equipped units that are absolutely beautiful. And so for someone who has worked hard to get themselves stable and get themselves to the level that they can live in a place like this, it means that they're succeeding in their recovery.
David has been on a long road to recovery. He's worked his way back from some rough years and is now one of the tenants approved to move in.
I'm looking forward to the fresh start. It's going to give me a little bit sense of belonging, maybe. It's giving me an opportunity to continue to grow, whether it's work, school, or something along those lines.
We will have our behavioral health staff here on site daily. Therapeutic groups will be here, so we will have on-site services. I just get goosebumps thinking about this accomplishment, and we will be expanding more of these types of opportunities through our partnerships to make sure that we get people off the streets. We make sure that we come up with those opportunities for individuals to have quality life, and that's what it's all about.
An expansion is underway. Currently, 2 more buildings are being remodeled, increasing the number of people who can be helped and housed.
As we create more housing opportunities, that moves people off the streets. As people move up in higher level capacities, this does make an impact.
We're going to do everything we can to be part of the solution, and we're happy to have the city and county as our partner. This building will be home for people for 20 plus years, and there's a long-term relationship that we can have with county behavioral health. And we're proud of that because I think we're in a situation to really help the most needy.
And it is a new beginning for so many like David, who's now looking forward to sharing his life with his children.
They're going to be proud of their father again. And I think that that's the biggest step that I can accomplish. Not only being a father to them, but having a place, and also that I've done this on my own. I'm proud of myself again.
It tells me that everything that we do in a day, it's really worth it. No matter what the challenges are, it's worth it.
I'm going to turn to my fellow board members. If you would like to ask a question or make a comment, Supervisor Elliott, we'll begin with you.
Well, thank you, Chair. No real questions, just my compliments and congratulations on this major accomplishment here in terms of providing better housing for those who have difficulties in terms of behavioral health. It's a segment of the population that we certainly need to provide some assistance to, and this is a great step forward in allowing the county to fulfill that responsibility. So congratulations, and keep up the great work in the future on this.
Supervisor Wynn?
Thank you, Madam Chair. To Peter's comment in regards to, this is a progression in increasing the opportunities for those who need housing. You're absolutely correct. 15 doesn't sound like a big number compared to the total that we have out there. However, for those 15 individuals and their families and friends, it's a big deal. So I always look at programs, and especially at budget time, in regards to numbers and quotas and percentages and all those other things, when in fact all of us are dealing with people, and that's really should be our focus. And Tony, to you, we've had discussions in regards to certainly behavioral health, and I guess the one thing that we keep talking about is that when we talk about the spectrum, for example, of homeless, the ones that I see that are most in need are those who can't help themselves, those who don't have the capacity to make decisions on, entering programs, those types of things. So I think, with this partnership, I think we're helping those 15 individuals to get back, to a normal life. So I'm always an advocate for helping those, and if I had the ability, which I don't, to fund, I would fund a lot more programs like this, because and nothing against the rest of the homeless population, but those who really don't have the medical capacity are the ones we need to prioritize. And I appreciate your efforts, and certainly yours, Peter.
Thank you.
Thank you. Supervisor Patty?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just want to say congratulations. I mean, these are the things, these efforts, and to see it come to fruition, these are the rewards for what you do when you serve the public and in your capacity in your departments. Great job by you, all of the staffs involved, and all of the efforts that it took to do this. It is very meaningful. Congratulations. We appreciate this.
Thank you.
Supervisor Villaputua?
Thank you, Chair. I just want to say congratulations on the collaboration. You guys work together and we're trying to help people in this county, and everybody needs help. So great job, and keep up the good work, guys.
Thank you.
Yeah, I remember the first conversations about this between you, and I can remember talking about this in New York. And, it's difficult for the public because these projects take a long time. It takes a long time to get the funding put together because it has to be cobbled together from multiple sources. It takes a long time to build the trust between organizations to partner on such an undertaking. And then it takes a long time just to do the conversions and to get the project built. And then we had COVID thrown in, and that added a lot of time to everything. But progress is being made. This is a wonderful project. And then in December, we're adding another 15, 16 units, and by March, another 15, 16 units. So by next spring, there will not just be 15 individuals whose lives and families' lives will be impacted, but there'll be 40 individuals. And that makes a huge difference. It really does. So while we're sorry we didn't get to actually cut the ribbon, I'm really glad that we had this video, because in all honesty, the public can view this now if they come to this board meeting online at the county's website, and maybe more people will be able to see it and understand the level of progress that you two are making in this community. So thank you very much. On behalf of the board, we're really pleased to participate in this today. Thank you both.
Thank you very much, and thank you for the opportunity. And I just want to publicly thank both collective our staff who have worked on these projects. Really, the credit goes to all the staff who are working tirelessly on anything that we do. So we get to come up here and really present, but I want to pass the credit to all of our staff, and also to say that it's an honor to serve in this capacity and serve our homeless population and our community. Thank you very much for that honor.
Thank
Sure.
you.
Thank you very much.
Okay, now is the time for public comment
Madam Chair.
Yes.
So I've been able to confirm that we do have Mary Nicholson on the call now, if you would like to take a
Great.
few moments to let her speak.
Mary, good morning. Would you like to make a few comments?
So Ms.
would.
Great. Go ahead, Mary.
Good morning, board. Thank you for all of the great comments. I am watching you on the screen, and thank you for the proclamation. I do want to say that right now, I'm trying to mute you on my end. I want to say that in 12 years, there will be more people over 65 than under 15 years old. The number of caregivers are going to be vital. There's got to be training. There's got to be more assistance in grooming not only family caregivers, but placing people who are serving as caregivers professionally. And so what Healings in Motion has been doing throughout the year has really been focused on making sure that the caregivers are getting training as family caregivers. And in addition to that, focusing on self-care. And the Inner Safari Caregiver Conference is a journey inward. And we have a roster of wonderful presenters that really focus on self-care, including people like the former CEO of Save Mart, who is doing some master movements to help people release stress, which we all need to do right now. And just recognizing the work that Healings in Motion has been doing. And I hear you in relationship to serving the caregivers because you've experienced caregiving in your own life. But what we're doing this coming Saturday happens to be the best presentation ever for caregivers, and it happens to be on Zoom, and so there's no limitation or geographic limitation for people actually being able to access this information and enjoy it, from laughter yoga, movements to help release stress, all kinds of wonderful things that are there for the caregivers. And anybody can go online and register right now. If you go to healingsinmotion.org events, and there you will be able to go to the link to register. And again, it's a free event. It is open to all people who are serving in some capacity as a caregiver, which is pretty broad right now because everybody needs some TLC, right?
Right.
I can see you. I can see you, Kathy. So anyway, thank you for the opportunity, and thank you for proclaiming November Caregiver Appreciation Month.
Thank you so much, Mary. Well deserved. We really do appreciate all the work you do in our communities.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Now is the time for public comment on matters within the jurisdiction of the Board of Supervisors that are not listed on the agenda, and any matters listed on the consent agenda. Public comments are being received via email. We ask that they be limited to 250 words or less, and you may submit them by emailing sjcpubliccomments@sjgov.org. And I'm now going to ask the clerk if we have received any public comments, and if so, if she would read them into the record.
Thank you, Madam Chair. We have received just a couple of public comments that I will read into the record. The first is anonymous and writes, "Dear Board, I won't call you out by name because I am above such childlike behavior, but make no mistake about it, the antics displayed at the October 20th board meeting were a disgrace, unworthy of you positions. Shame on you. I've rarely witnessed such a display in public, but old-timers know there is a rich and colorful history of political shenanigans in Stockton, yet the board has effectively lowered the bar. Believe it or not, you were placed in your positions to act on behalf of your constituents and for the good of the county as a whole. Obviously, some of you lost sight of why you are there while earning a generous salary that we taxpayers provide. Over the last few years, I've come to the realization that some of you need to take a tough look in the mirror and decide who you are and why you are sitting on the dais, especially those of you who have previously or are currently running for a higher office. I think we all expect and deserve better. The next comment is by Dennis Cochran, who writes, as a citizen of San Joaquin County, I am concerned about the integrity of the voting process. In the March 2020 primary election, serious questions arose concerning the chain of custody and handling of ballots cast. Some ballots were misplaced and the count was inaccurate. Every ballot was crucial to determining winners. The official outcome was declared and based on a one-vote difference. Some of our most respected citizens devoted long hours and focus on the process to ensure that every legitimate vote was counted accurately. The resulting tally left many still concerned about whether all legitimate ballots were counted. As November 3rd approaches, we see serious errors in the accuracy of the printed material sent to voters. Delta College trustee candidate in District 2 were omitted. Candidate statements were not sent to the voters in some cases and sent late. With early voting, there are errors that impact voter choices. We voters want to know how you will salvage this damaged election process. The registrar answers to the Board of Supervisors. An emergency meeting as soon as possible was needed. I want to thank Supervisor Tom Patty for taking the action to publicly calling for that emergency meeting. I do not hear of any other supervisors or the Register of Voters expressing concern about the alarming problem. What has the board actually done to protect the integrity of this election? The next comment is submitted by Nancy Cochran, who writes, in the March 2020 primary election, serious questions arose concerning the chain of custody and handling of ballots cast. Some ballots were misplaced and the count was inaccurate. Every ballot was crucial to determining winners. Regarding the emergency meeting of your board on October 21st, 2020, I was shocked that regular chairman Kathy Miller did not recuse herself, despite her clear conflict of interest as a candidate for the very office that already had the most inaccuracies in the ballot count. Worse yet, Kathy Miller used her position to volley arrogant and vicious criticism at the only supervisor who cared enough about basic voter information to take any action on very serious problems. When Supervisor Chuck Wynn insulted Mr. Patty at gutter level, Miller and Wynn did care about using the emergency meeting for their own political abuse of a fellow supervisor. They did not care about the voters' rights to ballot information. Your board is supposed to work together, and Miller and Wynn failed the voters of San Joaquin County. What should have happened? Some board members should have called for Kathy Miller to recuse herself. Even better, Kathy Miller could have started the meeting by recusing herself. The supervisor who represents me, Miguel Villapudua, apparently just sat silent. So did Bob Elliott. Nobody represented me or any other voter in San Joaquin County except Tom Patty. We also received a comment from Phyllis Groupie, who wrote, it was my pleasure to be part of the Shelter Committee review team. We reviewed 9 submissions for shelter-related funding and recommended 4 of them for consideration. Although some of the applications were completed with detailed responses and fairly complete budgets, it is apparent that others lack the expertise a professional grant writer would have had to demonstrate and articulate their responses. Thus, I have concern that viable shovel-ready projects from the Gospel Rescue Mission, Stockton Shelter, and others might be overlooked or underfunded due to weakness of application, not in project. Therefore, it would be my suggestion to have, if not now, in the future, an advisor to help develop the application for funding to those whose expertise lies serving the homeless, but may not shine forth in writing grants. We thank the Board of Supervisors for recommending this process and recognize that you have the best interests of our shelter leaders at heart. And Madam Chair, I'd also like to point out that we did receive 2 public comments from an Ernest Giannacini, a member of the public who has requested that this morning's public hearing be continued. I believe that Director David Kwong is prepared to address that during his presentation. I can read the comments now or later during the public hearing if you wish.
Let's go ahead and wait until we get to the public hearing.
That concludes the public comments that we've received.
Thank you. Okay, now we're going to move on to approval of minutes. We have the minutes of our regular board meeting of October 6, 2020 to be approved. If there are no corrections or additions needed, then I would be looking for a motion and a second to approve.
I'll make a motion to approve.
Second.
You have a motion and a second. Please cast your votes.
Sorry, Madam Chair, can you confirm who the seconder was? That win?
Supervisor Wynn. Minutes are approved 5-0. Thank you. Now we'll move on to appointments to boards and commissions. Today we have an interview for the appointment of one position to the San Joaquin Regional Transit Board. Board of Supervisors appointee, position 5701.1 for the term of November 8th, 2020 through November 8th, 2024. We have one candidate who is our incumbent, Mike Rastusha. And so I'm going to ask the clerk of the board, is Mr. Rastusha on?
I would like to confirm that he is available. I'm not sure if I see his number or not. So Mr. Rastusha, if you're available.
Yes, I'm.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can, Mike. Thank you. So then I will ask our county administrator, Monica Nino, to read the interview questions. And Mr. Rastusha then will be here to listen to your responses.
Good morning, Madam Chair, board members, Monica Nino, County Administrator. Good morning, Mr. Rastusha. I have a series of 5 questions that I will go through, and we may have some follow-up questions from our respective board members as a result of those 5 questions. The first one, please explain your interest in the San Joaquin Regional Transit District, your qualifications, and your understanding of the role as a director.
Great, thank you. Can I first just say those recognitions that you two presented were just awesome, so thank you for that. Yeah, one of the reasons I'm interested in retaining my seat on the transit district is to ensure the financial soundness of the organization, meet our goals of providing safe and reliable service, and provide leadership as an oversight. Boards aren't daily management of the organization. I see us as policy-making organization or group, strategic planning, and to support the mission and vision of our organization.
Thank you. Any follow-up from Madam Chair or board members? Okay. Question number 2. Share what you believe are the primary objectives for the Regional Transit District.
Sure. Our objective is really to provide the highest level of service to the greatest number of people within the resources that we have available. We need to be attentive and nimble to the mobility needs of our entire community, especially during the current environment with COVID. To the extent that the funding conditions and limitations are met, I don't know if most of you know, but most of our riders' income is around $15,000 annually, and many don't own a car or can afford a car. Our guests have jobs that depend on RTD and go to school that depend on RTD. Our objective is to ensure that they can get where they're going in a safe and comfortable manner.
What do you believe are the biggest threats to public transit?
Boy, that's a good question. There are 2 areas that I think are really threats to public transit. First, like every organization, funding. An example would be our decrease in sales tax and fare revenues, especially under the current environment. What are the changes in people's travel patterns and behaviors and preferences considering more online education and work from home programs? Continuing changes being required to provide clean air, et cetera, and the continuing upgrade of our equipment. And I don't know if you all are aware, but there was a study that was done that talked about 62% of Americans are trading in public transit for personal vehicles. And I don't know how that's going to affect us, and I don't think anybody does. But if you take a look, I think it's going to be location by location. For an example, rents are down 30% in San Francisco. Nobody ever thought that would happen. Well, what's happening is because people are now working from their home, they're moving further out so that they don't have to work off their dining room table. They can actually get another room. And so maybe the transportation in San Francisco will be negatively affected. But if people move out into our areas, that could be a positive for us. So I think to me, it's location by location. Secondly, one of the biggest threats to us is staffing. And if you take a look, it's 70% or some large percentage of our bus drivers and mechanics are going to retire over the next 4 or 5 years. And we're limited to the resources that we have access to. So I think that's probably one of the biggest threats we face now is not being able to fill our employees, and that's in every industry. But I think it affects us probably as much as anybody else.
What is your understanding of the future of public transit?
Well, I think it'll be around due to the demographics and the cost of transportation. With the recent changes that with our lives in a pandemic, it's clear there's a percent of our riders that can work from home and go to school. As I just mentioned in the article that was presented, we talk about this all the time, but we really don't know. There will be changes to service offerings and mobility platforms as the behavior and travel patterns change, and the preferences for people will change because of the pandemic. I think we're going to probably find more on-demand services. There may even be autonomous vehicles. I mean, that's not that puts people out of work, but that looks like it's coming somewhere down in the future. Contactless payments and introduction of new technologies.
Okay. And our last question, what things are you most proud of during your time that you've been a director?
So that's interesting. So there's a couple of things. One, on an agency level, and I take no credit for this, certainly the Agency of the Year in 2018 was handed out by American Public Transportation Administration. We constantly, 17 years in a row, got excellence in financial reporting. We were first in the nation to have implemented an all-electric BRT, and over $100 million of infrastructure in our county with essentially no debt. That's on an organizational level, but sounds like the question is, what am I proud of? What I'm also proud of is we've continually looked at our financial statements on an accrual basis, and everybody really kind of on the board got excited about the fact that we looked like we were always above budget, and I asked that we have not only a cash basis, but I helped put together a 12-month rolling average of cash flow so we can actually monitor the cash flow rather than getting tied up in an accrual basis where, as we all know, you can look great on an accrual basis and not be able to pay your bills. That's not our case, but that's what I led to. So we put that together so we can monitor that on a monthly basis. The other thing we did was we got a lot of credit through a bank because I was concerned about the impact of the borrowing capacity of COG, and I didn't want to impact that and have to set aside COG's borrowing capacity if, in fact, we can do it ourselves, which we did. So hopefully that relieves a little bit of pressure off of the COG borrowing capacity. The other thing that I worked on for about 4 years as I got into the board was to transition our non-vested, non-represented employees to a defined contribution plan. And what that did was that reduced the amount of money that the system had to pay into retirement. It gave more take-home pay to the employees, and again, everybody bought into that category that I just mentioned. And the benefit is that it's portable, and they own it. It's vested. It can be inherited, and so even though we had to subsidize part of it because as you take people out of a defined benefit plan, you got to subsidize the shortfall. Because the plans are going to be in perpetuity and the organization can be in perpetuity in the long run, it actually saves the organization money. On a short term, not so much, but on a long term, it will. So those are the two things that I helped implement, and I guess I could be proud of.
Well, I thank you, Mr. Rastusha, for responding to the 5 questions. Madam Chair, board members, any follow-up questions for Mr. Rastusha?
Mr. Rastusha, I would just want to ask if you'd like to make any kind of a closing statement, and then we'll see if the board has any questions for you.
Sure. I'll continue to work as hard and as smart with this appointment as I have in the past. I've been on transit board about 10 years, and I think I'm qualified. I can help. I'd be honored to accept the appointment and just to continue representing the county's busing system.
Thank you. Are there any questions from the board? Supervisor Elliott?
Thank you, Chair. Mr. Rastusha, you just mentioned that almost 10 years now you've been on the Regional Transit District Board, so we certainly thank you for your service and all your efforts and accomplishments. But I'm just curious as to why do you want to be reappointed?
You know, I think when you start on a board, you see kind of what you think you've been able to help with, and I want to continue that. I care about this county. I care about, probably more than anything else, being on the transit board, is I see our customers and who they are and the dependence on the busing system. I want to make sure that people that cannot afford to get around with a car or bus or taxi or Uber, if it ever comes back, that they have the ability to get to work and go to school. And that's the passion that I've got.
Thank you.
Supervisor Wynn?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Full disclosure, Mike, when he was mayor of the city of Ripon, appointed me to the Planning Commission back in 1999, and we've had the opportunity to serve together since 2002 on the city council. And I guess one of the comments I would make in regards to Mike and your service to the county has been, before the Transit Board, you were also on the Regional Rail Commission for a number of years before I came on the city council, so I know that's been a long time. So obviously you have a good grasp of the transportation methods that the county provides. I got a quick question in regards, you talked about the retirees in regards to the defined contribution. Is that 100% or is it a split system with the older employees having the defined benefit?
So the people that went in the defined contribution plan are non-represented, which means they're not part of the union, and non-vested, meaning they don't have the 5 years vested in the defined benefit plan. So when we put that together, that's the group that we identified as going into this. And again, I want to just mention that they were all very happy to go into that plan. So the ones that are already in the defined benefit plan that were vested were untouched.
Okay. And the last comment, I appreciate in your application you did talk about your financial acumen in regards to certainly also serving on our retirement board. So again, thank you. Thank you for all you do, Mike. I know you're busy, but I think you really contribute certainly to the residents of Ripon and certainly San Joaquin County. So thank you.
Thank you. Supervisor Patty?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Mr. Rastusha, one just real quick question. I know you're involved for the last 10 years. You want to continue. What would be the biggest vision and the biggest challenge for this board that you want to serve?
There's two challenges. One is funding, and that's always a challenge with everything we do, whether you're a county, whether it's retirement, whether it's city, but I think funding and again staffing. Those are the two issues I think that we really face some problems going forward with. I'm sorry, what was the second?
No, that was it. Just looking at what the vision, well, those are challenges. What would be a vision? Where do you see 10 years from now, where do you see the future going?
You know, I don't know what the demographics will look like, so I think it will depend on that. But, you know, the vision would be is to continue being able to do the things that we're doing. And one of the unfortunate part is we just can't provide services to everybody. You know, we may have a route that I don't get into the weeds of the routing and planning of that. But the concern I have is you may have 2 or 3 people on a route, and we used to have a lot of people. We'll hold public hearings, and we can't run a bus with just 3 people. So therefore, we have more on-demand type of transportation. So I think it's going to be autonomous and probably more on-demand than big buses just moving people around, I think.
Sorry, did you get cut out?
No.
Okay.
There we go.
Well, and just in conclusion, thank you for the service already performed on behalf of that board, and thank you for the interest to continue.
Great. Thank you, Supervisor.
Thank you. Supervisor Villapudua?
Thank you. Thank you, Chair. Mike, I just really want to thank you for the last 10 years of dedicated service. You're really engaged, I can tell, and you're really knowledgeable. And thank you for reapplying. I think you'd be a valuable asset to this board.
Great. Thank you, Supervisor.
Thank you. Full disclosure, I serve with Mr. Rastusha on the retirement board, and I have known him for over 20 years. He is definitely a very knowledgeable and engaged board director, and I know from interacting with him on One Voice trips in his capacity with the Regional Transit District and mine as a COG director, he brings a wealth of knowledge on various transportation issues. Did we receive any public comments on this, clerk?
Through the chair, no, we have not.
Okay, then at this time, I would be looking for a motion and a second.
I make a motion to reappoint, I can't say his last name, but I'd like to reappoint him, please.
Second. I think Supervisor Elliott.
Supervisor Elliott is the second.
Yes.
Great, we have a motion and a second. Please cast your votes.
A good Italian name.
Yeah.
Sicilian.
And Mr. Restuccia, you've been reappointed on a 5-0 vote. So thank you for your service and for your continued service.
Thank you all, and thank you for your service as well.
Great. Have a good day.
Thank you too. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Okay, now we're going to move on to our other appointments to boards and commissions. I am going to ask Supervisor Patty for your appointments in the form of a motion, please.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I do have the following recommendations. I've got probably about 7 or 8 here. Appointment of 6 positions to the Advisory Water Commission. 1, North San Joaquin Water Conservation District Representative, position number 1013, Charlie Starr, incumbent. 1, Central Delta Water Agency alternate, position number 1005A, Dante Nomalini Jr., incumbent. 1, Central San Joaquin County Water Conservation District Representative, position number 1006, Reed Roberts, incumbent. 1, Central San Joaquin Water Conservation District Alternative, position number 1006A, Grant Thompson, incumbent. 1, City of Stockton Representative, position number 1007.6, Dan Wright. And 1, City of Stockton Alternate, position number 10076A, Paul Canepa. I have an appointment to the Woodbridge Municipal Advisory Council, 1 member, position number 6601.2, Deborah Castellini. Madam Chair, that's all I have. I make this in a motion to approve these recommendations.
I'll second the motion.
All right, we have a motion and a second. Please cast your votes. And those appointments are approved, 5-0. Thank you. Now we're going to move on to our COVID-19 regular update and briefing. I'd like to ask Dr. Park to come down.
Good morning. Let's see here. Okay, this is a epi curve given to me by our epidemiologist, similar to the curves that I've shown you in the past, which show in bar form how many COVID positive cases we've had to date since the beginning of this pandemic. This N number at the top will be updated today to 22,365 confirmed COVID cases, and we're at 494 deaths. So we're approaching the 500 mark, unfortunately. As you can see, I was last here 4 weeks ago, and I wanted that curve to really take a stronger dip down back to where it was back in March, April, May. And it's stubbornly persisting right around that plateau that we've hit, and we haven't seen it make a significant dip down, but it's obviously much better than where we were in mid-July and August. The most recent bars look low, but again, we have backfill all the time, and so not likely to be accurate, but you can overall see with your eye how we've sort of come to a plateau. This is, as usual, the data that we get from our EMS agency on COVID-19 hospitalizations. And the blue line shows that the number of hospitalized people has also kind of plateaued over the last several weeks. It's been anywhere in the high 20s to the low 30s on a daily basis, and as of yesterday, we had 28 people in hospitals for COVID, 6 of them in the ICU. Those people in the ICU represent 7% of ICU beds that are occupied right now by COVID. Our total ICU capacity across the county is at 88%, so we're well below the 100% and above surge that we had been experiencing back a couple of months ago. Overall, hospital beds, including ICU, COVID patients are taking up 5% of our overall hospital bed numbers. So here again we have what the state shows us, and they've added that third column on health equity quartile testing positivity numbers so that it's easier to see this way. And I want to call your attention to the numbers that were posted last Tuesday. I don't have the numbers that will be posted this week yet. So what we're looking at are the numbers that were posted on October 27th. And if you see there, you will see that our case rate was 6.0, looking under the San Joaquin County box. The adjusted case rate was 6.3. So you use that adjusted case rate of 6.3, go over to the table, and you see that that's between 4 and 7, keeping us in the red for case rates. Our positivity rate was 3.7 last week, which if you look for the entire county, it's between 2.0 and 4.9. So for the second week, we didn't earn, but we had a testing positivity rate in the orange. And then our health equity quartile positivity rate was 5.0, a little bit up from the prior week, but at 5.0, that was also in orange between the 2.2 and 5.2. So our testing positivity was in orange. Our testing positivity for the health equity quartile was in orange. Our case rate remained in red, and we did not earn a week towards orange because of that. The state has decided that the numbers that will be released this week won't come out until Wednesday. Due to the elections, we will not be seeing the updated tier assignments today. Usually those come out on Tuesdays. So you will see that at the bottom of this graph where I've compiled all the numbers, I've put 11.4 instead of 11.3 because that's when it's going to be released publicly, and I don't have them yet. The median will be used again as 239.21 because we hold on to that same number for 4 weeks, and next week the state median will be readjusted to whatever it is that week. And with all counties testing as feverishly as they can, this might get driven up even more. But all I know is that the median will be 239, will be measured against that median, and I do know that we'll stay in red because even if we earn a week towards orange or earn a week towards reverting back to purple, you need 2 of those weeks to revert, 3 of those to move forward, so I know for sure we'll stay in red this week either way. You'll note at the bottom that I wrote counties with a test positivity of less than 3.5% will be exempted from adjustment for testing rates lower than the state median. So if you note for the week of 10/27, that differed from the week prior at 10/20, even though our testing rate was almost identical. The week that was judged for 10/20, we had, as you know, it was a 1-week lag, so it was really from the week prior that we were told that we had a testing rate of 204.7. Then for the numbers that went up last week, we had a testing rate of 204.8. And although our testing rates were almost identical for 2 weeks in a row, on 10/20, we did not suffer that case rate adjustment for testing below the median because our testing positivity was less than 3.5 at 3.3. Last week, our testing positivity being at 3.7 and above that 3.5 marker, we did suffer a small coefficient because we again tested below the median, so our case rate was adjusted from 6.0 to 6.3. I have some ideas of what might show up on Wednesday based on what our epidemiologists follow. The numbers that we follow are often very close to the states but don't exactly match, so I can't say for sure what we will look like on Wednesday. But I do believe that we're moving in the direction closer towards reverting back to purple. So unfortunately, this is not just in our county, but in many counties in the state that we're experiencing a new beginning of what might be a surge, and we're seeing upticks across the state. And so here is the reason why I think that. When we look at our rate by week, as you can see, the week that will be judged for this coming Wednesday's tier assignment is the week of October 18 to October 25. We're somewhere around 50, 49, 50. If you divide that by 7 days a week, we're right at around 7. And here's another way that we are looking at this now, and that arrow is, I should have removed this slide and put in our new slide for this week. This arrow is from the week before. Shift your eye over 1 week, and that arrow really shows you around October 18 to 25, the week we're being judged for. We're really hovering around that 7 mark. And we've put a red line there which shows that right at a case rate of 7 or below, you stay in red. When you hit above 7, you revert to purple. So if you look at the end towards the right, we're really hovering around a case rate of 7 right now. Very close to reverting to purple. But I believe that we're testing right around the median as well. And so looking at the state snapshot tool, I feel that we might not suffer an adjustment factor this week, or if at all, it would be very tiny. And so we might be just under 7 and able to stay in red. I don't know. So that's just, a warning to all of us and as the public that we need to bring our case rates down. And again, all of that is looked at by the state, and I wanted to bring to your attention that the state's also looking at the most recent 10 days of data. This language was just added on October 24th. So in order to move back, it used to say all of this, including that you had to have 2 consecutive weeks in either case rate or testing positivity. It's an and or. So as long as one of them falls back to purple for 2 weeks, you move back. But the language that was added was the state will review the most recent 10 days of data. So they are now willing to say, okay, we know that your 2 consecutive weeks were based on 7-day backlogs with the purposeful lag in time, but we're willing to look at your most recent 10 days of data to see if you're making any improvement or progress, and we may allow you to stay in red instead of reverting to purple. So that might be something that becomes very important to us. The rest of the language is really the same. And again, point 3 says that if you are to revert, you have 3 days to then close your businesses back up. So I thought that I would bring to you some different sort of data to try to point out where we think our case rates are coming from, where we think we might have an issue, and this is case rates by age. And I've been saying this for a few weeks now, is that our young adults have the highest case rate per 100,000 population. And so ranking 1 is the age group 18 to 24, and ranking 2 is the age group 25 to 34. They've stood out for the last several weeks as the highest ranking groups by age. These are not the groups that are dying in our hospitals, but these are the groups that we feel are likely to be asymptomatic or mildly symptomatic and are our silent transmitters. So we believe there is spread from these groups. I also wanted to bring your attention to city data, because what you look at when you look at our dashboard is an overall cumulative number of how many cases there have been in each city, but this really gives you an idea of what's happening in the last couple of weeks. So of course, if you look, the blue line back in July, we had by far more cases in Stockton, but as you move into August, you will see that that gray line, which is Lodi, actually bumped up over Stockton. And if you look at the week that just ended October 25, that week, you'll see that Lodi's case rate per population per 100,000 is in the 80s, whereas others are in the 60s and below. So Lodi is ranked number 1 right now for case rate per 100,000. My next few slides, I will be talking about the revisions that came out on October 20, and there were many, and we were flooded by little revisions to the guidances that were made by the state, and this was done without us knowing ahead of time that this was happening. We did know that on October 20 there was going to be some language coming out about theme parks, because that was big in the news, and we did receive some heads up that personal care services would be allowed to open in purple tier across the board, not just hair and nail, but all personal care services. But we didn't know that there would be so many changes. There were some that were quite minor, and I can't bring them all to you because there were many minor changes to the guidances. I've clipped a picture of the movie theater guidance just to remind you that this is what the cover of every guidance looks like. So for every industry that has permission to either open in purple, red, orange, or yellow, there is an industry guidance. And they are to follow this state guidance to know how to reopen, how to sanitize, and how to work with clients. So first off, movie theaters got their own guidance. It used to be under the family entertainment guidance, but they were pulled out and given their own guidance. As I said, theme parks got a guidance, and that was a new guidance. Personal care services weren't given a new guidance, but they were pulled into purple tier for all counties. Gyms and fitness centers, and I'm just highlighting some of the language here. The most pertinent language was that indoor hot tubs, saunas, and steam rooms could open in yellow tier. Climbing walls were taken out of the family entertainment guidance and put into gyms and fitness centers, and they can open in red tier. The hotel guidance also included language about hot tubs and saunas opening in yellow tier. Professional sports got a new looking guidance, not brand new guidance, but some newness to it with some language on live audiences, permitted outdoors, so only outdoors, starting in orange tier, and I will show you that guidance later. It's coming up. But as I said, some of the language was very minor. For example, some of the language for the museum and zoo guidance, instead of being called outdoor museum and open air galleries and outdoor zoo guidance, since some of these facilities are now allowed to open indoors, it was just changed to museums, galleries, botanical gardens, zoos, and aquariums instead of outdoor museums, outdoor galleries. So I can't possibly highlight all the language, but just to give you an example of how minor some of the language changes were. More revisions to call to your attention is that family entertainment centers guidance got this language added, which says that they must discontinue demonstrations such as magic, live animal shows, rented spaces for birthday parties, so on and so forth. The hotel language, there were some changes. They took out the word large meeting venues, so basically any meeting venue is now not operational. Banquet halls, convention centers, instead of should keep closed, they must keep those areas closed. So a couple of more revisions. And then many of the guidances, if you were to look at them, they will say they were revised on October 20th, but they were basically just revised to update this language on tiers. So now that we have this tier system, for example, the museum, zoos, and aquarium guidance now has a section about what tiers they would open in and how they would open. So a lot of the guidances might say that they were updated, but this was the only update. And some of them got this new tier language, and if they were indoor guidances, then they got language about ventilation. And in many cases, those were the only two things that were added. All of the guidances start off with some language about how there have been outbreaks, and that's why there's a reason for this guidance and a reason why the state is regulating some of these businesses, and that language on outbreaks was only updated to add the word restaurants. So it used to say hospitals, long-term care facilities, prisons, food production, warehouses, meat processing plants, and grocery stores were experiencing outbreaks, and the word restaurants has been added to that in every guidance. The language on ventilation says consider installing. It was changed to where possible, install. So they're trying to use a little bit stronger language. Where possible, do not clean floors by sweeping or other methods. And then they added, unless all people had their PPE on. A new line was added on never using hand sanitizers with methanol due to its toxicity. Warning language is added on how physical distancing alone is insufficient to prevent transmission. And then some language on workspaces and the use of break rooms. So those were some of the main highlights. This guidance on sporting events now has racetracks. So this is the guidance that they're calling the professional sports guidance. Racetracks was taken out of the card room guidance because it seemed to fit better here. So the card room guidance now just says it's on card rooms, and racetracks is here with professional sports. And I just wanted to clip the page on what tiers those sporting events can now have some limited outdoor spectators and viewing. So for example, in the orange tier, you could have 20% capacity, and there's words about ticketing and ticket sales, and so people would need to be directed to really look at this language. So those were the major differences that were made to guidances on October 20th. There was some language also changed to a school guidance on October 20th, so lots of changes on October 20th were made. I want to put this slide up because I want to bring attention to the fact that the sjready.org website is really where you need to go now to find out where you can get tested. And we still need to continue to push the testing. As I said, we are in danger of reverting to purple this week. If we don't, then we've come probably very close. As I showed you, our case rate is right around 7, and our testing volume is right around that median. So again, we need to push to bring that testing volume up. And it's just the right thing to do in general. If you test more, especially in our low equity quartiles, sure, we're going to find more positives that will add to our case rate, but in the long run, we will effectively isolate those who are the asymptomatic people who need to be staying home and not going to work. So it is the right thing to do, and we need to keep asking people to test. And if you go to SJ Ready, you will see that these are all the fixed testing sites we have now. Some of them are state-sponsored, the OptumServe and the Verily. We continue to have those for now. And below this, the SJ Ready folks are also adding pop-up sites as they come. And speaking of pop-up sites, this is the pop-up sites that have been managed by our county clinics. And so similar to what Mr. Diedrich showed you last Board of Soups meeting, this is the updated table for the events that happened in October. And they are planning and have a calendar for November. So testing that is focused for homeless and testing focused for ag workers is still going on. I will tell you that though this testing is focused on ag workers, not everyone tested at those events are actually ag workers, and the way we look at it when we do our contact tracing and case disease investigations, it appears that ag workers are no longer contributing to large numbers of COVID in our county. It's really low, to be honest with you, and it's more of what I told you, our younger adults. So this is my last slide, and it's on schools. On October 13th, we had stayed in red for 2 weeks because we made it to the red tier on September 29th, and once we stayed for 14 days, we no longer needed schools to ask for a waiver process in order to open TK through 6th. All schools were able to open based on the fact that we had stayed in red for 2 weeks. So County Public Health stopped accepting waivers at that point as they became a moot point. Of course, if we revert to purple, we will reopen that process. But before we stopped accepting waivers, we did accept 74 schools waivers, and we approved them all. So this is a total number of schools, not districts. Some of those, maybe some of the districts that are very large account for up to 20 of those schools. But in total, 19 of those schools were private and the rest were public. We are now tracking COVID cases occurring at our elementary schools and our high schools. We've had 19 schools with positive COVID cases so far. and this goes back to mostly September 1 and August, which was mostly before school opened but happened in an office staff. So this is mostly from September to October. The majority being in October, and I will tell you, even within October, the majority of that being last week. So it all kind of goes along with the fact that we're seeing increased transmission, increases in our case counts. And so last week we were really flooded, 2 to 3 schools a day, 4 on Friday, with COVID positive cases requiring us to shut down classes. So some of those 19 schools have had multiple instances. So I just named the schools there, but there have been some schools where there have been 2 separate classes that have needed to quarantine or 2 separate cohorts. In total, 14 classes have had to quarantine for 14 days based on exposure. And then we've had other situations where we've need to quarantine football groups, office staff, kids sitting on the same bus who might go to a different school, but were on the bus in close proximity to a positive child, cafeteria workers, and so forth. Preschools and daycares, we've had 21 quarantine situations, and for the most part, they're small, and when they quarantine, usually it's the entire daycare, and many times it's been the entire preschool. So there have been 21, but this dates back from before September because, as you know, these have been essential, and many of them stayed open throughout the pandemic. So this goes back to as early as May, June, that we were having some quarantine situations. So we're at a total of 21 in those situations. So that is, that's the last slide, as I said, and be happy to take questions. Thank you.
Any questions for Dr. Park?
I don't know.
Supervisor Wynn?
When we started down this path, the whole focus was because we didn't want to overwhelm our medical facilities. Currently, if we look at the numbers, and especially the deaths that have occurred in this county, it's most of the time it's 0 over the past 24 hours. And it seems to me that what's happened is that in just going through the details you provide is just overwhelming. And the thing is that, you know, we've talked about this before, they keep changing. You know, it isn't stationary where you can kind of get a handle on it, and everybody, including businesses and schools and parents, you know, can kind of say, okay, this is what we need to do, and we'll focus on that. But then they add another matrix. I'm not so sure that they may add other criteria in regards to it, but it would seem to me, based upon the low number of cases in hospitals and in ICUs, and the low number of deaths compared to what we have, that it would seem that, you know, all this testing and the positives and all this stuff, we've never done this for any other, you know, virus, the flu, et cetera. We have had just as high numbers in a lot of areas. Understanding, I get it, that maybe it's not as deadly, but it's only deadly at the higher ages. It's not for the youth. So yes, and I know we all know people, directly or indirectly, who've had COVID. Those that I know, it's been very mild, really very short-lived, not overwhelmingly sick, but, you know, not feeling well. And I guess the thing is that we keep hearing all these statistics in regards to children and the adverse impact on them not being in school, whether it be food or reporting abuses and those types of things. We hear about, you know, substance abuse, and it goes on and on and on. So unfortunately, it seems to me that we're creating problems that otherwise wouldn't be happening, as other countries have done. And I guess my frustration is that, you know, it seems like this is never ending. It doesn't matter what we do. It doesn't matter that the hundreds of thousands and millions of dollars that we contribute in the testing, certainly in all the PPE, et cetera, and certainly the loss of jobs and et cetera. It just seems like and even with all this control, we're, as you said, we're still continuing to periodically see increases. So this isn't a solution. If it were like we were down to almost 0, I'd say, yeah, okay, but it's not. And it continues that way. And it's not just California, it's other states. So I guess my frustration is And I'm not blaming you. I understand your position. However, it just seems like, there's people in Sacramento sitting in a basement with no windows with nothing more to do than come up with some kind of criteria, because it keeps adding and adding, and they keep messing with they put this here and then they put that there, et cetera. I just find that, I've gone to some meetings or events recently, and I'll just tell you, there's a lot of frustration and actually anger in regards to not being able to return to some type of normality in their life. So that's my concern. So anyway, thank you for your report. It's always, illustrative of what we are doing, but this going back and forth and purple, and we talked about the waivers. I just think it seems like this is never ending, and some keep talking about this is going to go through 2021 and possibly 2022. I hope not, because I'll tell you, you see riots in the street in Europe, they may occur here in this country with this continuation. So thank you for your report. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Supervisor Wynn. I certainly hope that it's not never ending. I need it to end. At what point do we say it ends? I don't know. When we get a vaccine and it's reduced to something like the flu that comes up yearly and seasonally, I don't know. You mentioned hospitalization numbers, and it's interesting that you bring that up because we had a call with the state just yesterday. Not we, the county, but all health officers. And that was brought up again by multiple counties that have low hospitalization rates. It used to be one of the markers and metrics that were used when we had the old county data monitoring watch list. And so some counties would like that reintroduced as a bonus factor or as some sort of factor that could give you credit towards moving through the tiers. The state seems quite stubborn with sticking to case rate and testing positivity. So we see no movement on that, but I know that our neighboring counties are fighting that issue and trying to work that. So, yes, we have low hospitalizations right now, which is great. We have ICU capacity available. The goal is to not get to the point where we're flooded again. We're nowhere near that, obviously. We'll see if the state ends up changing their minds, but that's actually been an issue. And as far as children go, it's such a difficult topic. I will say that, yes, our kids have not died from this, but we've had several requiring ICUs. And you might not see that number. We've had a couple who have had that MISC. We've had the inflammatory syndrome happen in some of our children. So it can be scary, but you're right. Overall, their rates are low, their risk is low, but the risk will never be zero. And so that is the problem. And I wish that people would still take the younger ages getting COVID seriously, because as I said, our young groups are likely to be asymptomatic transmitters. When I showed the numbers for the young adults, it didn't really show that kids had a high case rate, but they've been largely protected throughout this. And out of the 74 schools that have received waivers, not all of them are even open yet. They've had plans to open at some time in November. So they're opening this week and next week, and so we will see more transmission. And I'm taking it for granted that we will see outbreaks. There have been 2 school outbreaks so far in the state of California, and it's going to happen. One of the schools that quarantined just last week, those kids were told specifically to stay home for 14 days because they were all exposed to a positive classmate, and then another classmate became positive. So they were linked, and we know that school had a problem, and yet we learned yesterday that some of those kids went trick-or-treating over the weekend. So therein lies the problem, is you see a kid who looks asymptomatic and the parents are just so tempted to say, I want to go back to normalcy, as you said, some form of normality, and let my kid do this because he's fine. But that's the problem, is if we all had that attitude, transmission would never stop, because somebody is bound to be positive without knowing it, and you need to stay home when we ask you to. But I thank you for bringing that up. We're definitely trying to work back to that normality, but at the same time, need those who should stay home at the same time.
To your point, we had 150 trick-or-treaters.
Yeah, so, the state strongly discouraged trick-or-treating, but we knew that was going to happen. And in a couple of weeks, we'll see if our numbers bump up from that as well. Just as we were looking after Mother's Day and Father's Day and all these holidays, we will be closely seeing what Halloween did to us.
Thank you. Supervisor Elliott?
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I'd like to just add my encouragement here to continue to argue the case that we need to reopen and get back to normal. It seems that we've completely shifted the discussion from the original flatten the curve. We've did that long ago. If you look at our hospitalization rates, our ICU rates, it's pretty flat. And we're never going to get to zero on these things. I mean, that's just completely unrealistic to expect that there will be zero cases. That's what happens with these viruses. They're just here. I don't think we've ever gotten to zero with any of the other viruses that have caused a scare in the past. I mean, swine flu, Ebola. I don't think they even came up with immunizations for some of that stuff. But it never resulted in the huge scare tactics and the just unreasonable closures of activities in our daily lives that we're continuing to experience now. So I would just urge you to continue to argue for common sense here in what we're doing. We need to get the word out on how people can protect themselves, but we need to allow people to exercise that common sense in exercising those precautions that they need to do. But just this continued focus and this continued moving of the goalposts, and it seems like a continued moving of the goalposts with the intent to make it more difficult for counties to resume their normal activities. So I would just encourage you to continue to argue for some common sense here, return to a sense of normalcy here, exercise caution, but allow people the opportunity and the courtesy to use their own common sense in what steps they need to take.
I appreciate that, Supervisor Elliott, and we do try, those of us who get on these calls with the state, and I know you participate in your CSAC calls as well with the state, and I will say that some of the decisions made don't quite make sense to me and sometimes conflict with other things they've said. So, it's difficult for them as well to try to be in line with all of the guidance they put out there. When we do push back, what the state says is, look at us. As a state, California, we are being commended nationally for having this tier system and for going at this slow and paced way of proceeding through tiers, because other states are faring much worse than ours. And so that's the pushback we get from them, is that this is working for us. But I do understand that there's such a balance. We have low numbers in our hospitals, and yet thousands of people who own businesses and have jobs that are suffering. So, and all I can do at this point right now is, implore people to do what they can. If you're sick, stay home. If you're not, get tested. And that is exactly, what we are asking people to do constantly. But as we've said before, we can't actually take people to a testing place. We just need to keep saying it. But I appreciate that, Supervisor.
Thank you. Are there any other questions for Dr. Park? Supervisor Patty?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Stats are great. We get this every board meeting. We see all these graphs and stats. And it's important to kind of see where the trends are. But I'm more interested, what are we doing to be proactive? It's not shared in any slide. At one point, we had some commercials. We had some horrifically, terribly graphic billboards that were put out. What are we doing now for outreach?
It's still happening, Supervisor Patty. The billboards have been changed to a new color and a new look. And in addition to the standing billboards, we have the digital billboards. And so we have our new look up, as well as some of the mask-on billboards, because it flashes, it changes digitally. We still have our public messaging campaign. It's very active. Social media. and we do take from the states and reproduce what they give us, so it's quite constant. It's a matter of people listening to it, but the effort is ongoing. It hasn't stopped. I've been on the news many times with this message. Wherever we have the ability to get our faces in the public, we try.
So whatever we're doing, I don't see it on social media, and I watch morning news and evening news as well, and a little bit of TV, but I'm not seeing any messaging at all. It's difficult to compete during a campaign cycle, maybe. That's dominating most of the messaging that's out there. But I'd like to see that in our report every 2 weeks of what actually we're doing. Where do we spend money? How many advertisements were run? What type of social media outreach? What type of response? How many interactions? How many people clicked on something to get more information about testing or preventative care? These are all measurements that can happen when you engage with the public. So I'd like to see more of that in that report. And whatever we're doing, is that could we be more effective if you had more budgeting? What's the holdup from doing more? If we're trending back up, something's going on. What can we do? How can we help you?
So Supervisor Patty, we do have those numbers, and I had shown them to you, I think at a couple meetings, and then I thought it might be overkill to do it every time, but if you'd like to see those numbers, I will certainly share them with you. We keep track of how many likes we have on Facebook and how many videos have been viewed, so I can certainly share that in my reports.
The question is, what can we do more of? Is it a budget issue? What's going on? We've asked this in the past, and you've indicated that if you need something, you'll come to the board. Are you fully satisfied with the budget you have?
I thank you for that question, first of all, and it's a difficult one. We have the support that we've needed, and the things that I have found significant that we have asked for, we have done, and we have received support from the county for that. So there are some things that maybe we could really expand upon, but it would take a lot of manpower, and I would have to pass that through the people who are above me for any further things that we might come up with. If you have specific ideas, I would love for you to share them.
Sure, and I appreciate that. Why wait? If we start to see a trend up and a concern, and we're going to revert back to purple, I'd hit the panic button and say, okay, we need to up our efforts. We need to do more of. We would accelerate through whatever channels and process to get that, not to be reactive, but let's be more proactive. And I know we did a great job trending way down as it is. We're starting to see a little trickle up. That's a concern for you and all of us and the community. Where are we at with rapid testing? I was just down in Los Angeles, did a test. 15 minutes later, I had a text message that I was negative. 15 minutes later. There was, in the grouping there was one positive. It ended up being a false positive, but in 15 minutes, I had 100 people were going through the process and getting results right then and there. So why are we not doing that, or what can we do? Or is that, I know it's been talked about by Mr. Dietrich, it's been talked about by this board. What can we do to have more rapid testing instead of having a test? And I do it weekly, so 3 days later I get a result. And in those 3 days, if I were positive, God forbid, I might be exposing other people. So we need more. We need to do more, in my opinion. So, and how can we help that? And I know I'm not circumventing. Supervisor Wynn might chastise me because I'm trying to fix something. I'm just engaging in what can we do more of so that we're not seeing this trend go up. Businesses contact me. They're panicked. Are we going to have to shut down again? And this is not a viable future for them. It's not good for our county, the residents and the citizens, to revert. So what's missing here? We need more.
So I can speak to antigen testing. Antigen testing doesn't have as high specificity and sensitivity as PCR tests. They are point of care, so yes, you get your results in 15 minutes, but because the reliability is not as good as a PCR test, they're not counted by the state. So as many times as you get tested using an antigen test, it's not bringing up bringing down our testing positivity number. Anybody who's positive with an antigen test doesn't bring up our case rate. They're just not counted. When an antigen test shows up positive, It's very reader dependent, so it could be false positive because much like a pregnancy test, you have to look at 2 lines. Sometimes if that line is faint, it's misread as a positive. Sometimes if the line doesn't go border to border, it's misread as a positive. And so we know that there are false positives out there because they don't get subsequently confirmed with PCRs. There's also false negatives. And for that reason, the state has any urgent care or facility using antigen tests to report them as positives as probables, but not as real positives. So they don't get counted. So number one, that's a problem. As I said the last time I was here, it's hard to get your hands on antigen tests. We do have some urgent cares that have been able to purchase them and they use them, and some ERs that use them for cohorting purposes to get positives away from negatives in the ER as soon as possible. But the federal government did buy up some of the brands, and one of them, called Sophia Quidel, was dispersed to all our skilled nursing facilities across the country, so they do have them. They don't use them that much. The antigen test is supposed to be used on somebody who is symptomatic. That is the way they are marketed, and that is what they have been FDA approved for under an emergency use authorization. It's supposed to be used in someone who is sick, developing symptoms, and within 5 to 7 days of their onset of symptoms is when it's supposed to be used, not beyond 7 days. So when it's used on an asymptomatic person for surveillance, the reliability is not that great. That's the problem. And so even our skilled nursing facilities might use them occasionally, but are generally holding on to the supply they got from the federal government for as-needed situations. The federal government also bought up the Abbott Binax now, which is the latest antigen test that was being utilized in the White House for their surveillance purposes. Same sort of idea, 15-minute point-of-care testing, supposed to be used on symptomatic people within 7 days of onset of symptoms. They then dispersed it to the states, and the states dispersed it to the counties. So each county did receive, if they requested, a shipment of the Binax now. Our county did receive some, and it is up to our MOAC, our Medical Health Operational Area Coordinator, who is our EMS Director, to dispense them. And so people need to make a request through the MOAC if they want to get their hands on some of this Binax supply. The problem with this is that, again, we have health professionals who realize that, number one, it doesn't count, and number two, if you're negative, you have to get a PCR anyways. You need to get tested again. You need to be confirmed. And then there's work. Number three, there's work to this. You have to have a CLIA waiver. So we can't just give it to anybody who wants it. You have to have a CLIA waiver, which is a certain sort of lab licensing. You have to have access to CalReady, because if you're going to be doing these point-of-care tests, you are required to put them in the CalReady as negative or probable. And you have to have access to an app that was developed by the Abbott company called the Navica app. So you have to double enter your results in the app and into CalReady. So because of all this red tape, we don't have a lot of takers, to be honest with you, on the Binax nows that we have. And those requests that will come in, EMS will dispense them.
Okay, so they're unreliable, and there's a hesitation to use them for several factors. I appreciate the dissertation on it.
I will tell you that if you use them on asymptomatic people, the state has said it's useful to, and maybe even equal to, doing a PCR every week if you did it daily, if you did an antigen test on somebody daily. So, for example, the guidance called Institutes for Higher Education, there was new language added to that a couple of weeks ago for athletics. So, for example, UOP. If a university wants to bring back their college athletes, they were told to do so with only distanced conditioning or with cohorts of 6 to 12 athletes. So you could only have up to 12 athletes work out together at a time. The state updated that a couple of weeks ago to say that if you have antigen testing and you do it daily on your athletes, with PCR testing every 7th day or so on top of that, you could then expand to 75 athletes outside together or 25 inside. So there's some interest from our university in this Binax now, and so some of our supplies may be going there. San Joaquin General Hospital got some from our EMS agency, and they're running a validation study on it right now. They're trying to see with patients that are getting tested for COVID, they're doing PCR and the Binax, the antigen, to see what is the comparison. Does it reliably test? UCSF did a similar study just last month. They took 178 people and they tested them both ways, a nasopharyngeal, PCR test, and then the Binax now. And out of the 178, they found, I think it was 26 positive people by PCR. And out of the 26, the Binax found 15 of them and missed maybe 11, I think, of them. So it was able to find those with the very high viral load. And those with lower viral loads in their nostrils were the ones that were missed. And you know viral load because when the lab processes the test, the PCR test, there's something called a cycle threshold, meaning how many times did you have to cycle that person's sample through before it got flagged as positive. And the lower cycle threshold means that person's test came up positive very quickly. Low cycle threshold relates to high viral load, and those with low cycle thresholds were the ones that were found to be positive by Binax. So it did find those people, but missed a significant number.
So you've got a concern in that there was a demographic that you're looking at that may be asymptomatic and might be super spreaders. What are we doing to reach out to them and communicate with them so that we can have that impact that maybe lessens the concern?
Yeah, again, it is messaging. We are trying to engage with our CBOs to help us with that messaging, so that is forthcoming still. We are going to be working with them and offering them some money to be doing that work for us. So that is all coming. In the meantime, the state knows that this is a problem statewide, and that's why you see commercials of young people partying together. You see this on TV. There's commercials with young people in their 20s and 30s having parties, and there's all kinds of language about don't do this. And so this has been out there. This message has been out there for some time. It's a matter of the young people taking it up and thinking that it pertains to them. So I guess we need to do some more of that, and as I said, it's ongoing, but we have been doing that.
Understood. Well, in conclusion, I appreciate all the efforts that's happened. We see a major dramatic drop. That's been great. The concern ticking up is from a lot of people calling me up with the business owners, very concerned about where we're going. So whatever we need to help level that and bring it back down, please, let's not be reactive. Let's be proactive.
Sure, thank you. And let me just say one more thing in regards to businesses. Our DA called me this morning and said she'd like to help restaurants, maybe in Central Lodi, Central Stockton, to stay on their feet. And I said, let's do it. And in order for them to stay open, we cannot revert to purple because then they would have to shut down indoors again and only be outdoors. And with the cold weather coming, that's just not desirable. So I'm going to be working with her on getting test sites up around restaurants. And so we're trying, but really the message is get tested. Let's bring up our volume. Let's really hone in on that volume, and let's try to bring down our testing positivity by getting people tested. So we will be focused on some businesses in the coming weeks.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Supervisor Villapudua.
Thank you, Chair. Good morning, Dr. Park.
Good morning.
Thank you for that report, and I know you're in a tough spot working with the state, and you're trying to do a good job for this county. Just curious, have you heard any positive news regarding the vaccine in the next coming months or anything?
And there's a lot of news on vaccine. Obviously, everyone's very focused on that. And the state has started having biweekly calls called the COVID vaccine planning calls, and they've created a playbook. Right now, the playbook is very rudimentary because even they don't have a lot of the information. There's a lot of unknowns right now. There are maybe over 100 global companies globally working on a vaccine. And what we hear a lot about is the Moderna and the Pfizer vaccines. Those are at the forefront right now for the state of California. The CDPH is working on getting their hands on that supply because those are the ones that are further along in phase 3. Those two companies, Moderna and Pfizer, are expected to submit their plans to the FDA around the 3rd or 4th week of November. And the FDA will take its time to review their plans and review all the data that they collected from phase 1, 2, and 3 of their trials. And if there are no problems, as early as December, possibly January, both vaccines will receive their FDA approvals. Thereafter, how much we get as a state is still an unknown. How much the state of California will get will depend on the feds. And then what the state does as far as dispersing to counties might depend on our population size, but they haven't decided for sure. So there's a lot of planning going on. We know that the Pfizer vaccine requires ultra cold storage, so there's a lot of planning going on how to manage that. And the company has created a proprietary box with which they're going to be able to disperse this. So it looks like 5 pizza boxes stacked within dry ice, has to be kept in that dry ice. There's all kinds of rules. If you've got an ultra cold freezer, you can take the vials out, but you've got 5 minutes to do it, to transfer it to a freezer. If you're going to open a box, the pizza box, there's 195 vials in there, and there's a certain amount of time that you've got to use them. They thaw in 30 minutes, and then you've got to start injecting them. So there's a lot of planning within public health. We are starting to plan for this as well. We had a mass vaccination flu clinic amongst our own staff. We vaccinated all of our own staff at Public Health, but it was a practice trial run to see how we might be able to do this with COVID. We're getting 100 of our staff fit tested for the purpose of possibly needing our staff in N95 gear, so they have to be tested and fitted for the N95 gear in case we need them for mass vaccination. However, I don't know if we're going to be getting mass supplies of vaccines from the state. They are prioritizing their list right now, and healthcare agencies are at the top of that list as well.
Well, thank you for that update.
Mm-hmm. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Park. Always interesting to get the numbers. I did notice on the list of testing sites, at least as of last week, you could still sign up for a Verily test at the drive-through Rite Aid in Lincoln Center. Yes. And I saw that it wasn't listed. I'm assuming that it's under the clinics, that if you go on, it'll ask you the location you want.
Right. At this point, if you go to the Project Baseline website, it'll pop up as a choice still. As to how long the Verily sites will stay open is still up in the air. Those are state-sponsored sites, and contracts end November 30th, and we don't know yet if those are going to be extended, contracts between the state and the Verily people, because it has been at no cost to the county. So we'll see. I'm hearing in some calls that I'm participating in that the state will extend those contracts, but we don't know for sure. We haven't heard for sure. And so we'll see if that site remains a site for good. So the Rite Aid, yes, the San Joaquin General Hospital site, and then we have the Eastland Plaza on Mondays. Those are all Verily sites. Out at the hospital, it's starting to get cold, so we're talking about that as well. If we were to be able to keep that up, how would we manage that with it getting so cold outside for the employees? So we're constantly discussing.
Right, but the Rite Aid site, if it is still an option, it should be on that list so that people can see it when they go to the SJ Ready. And I did not notice it. I only saw the San Joaquin General Hospital Clinic site. So I just think people need to know as many possibilities that are out there, especially with that one being a drive-through. You don't have to leave your car. You do it. It's self-administered. It's very quick, and for a lot of people, that would be the preferred. If you live anywhere on the north side of the city of Stockton, but not far enough to go to Lodi, that's going to be a very convenient location. So if we want people to use it, I think we do need to have that listed.
I would agree. I personally would like that site to continue for as long as possible because it is self-collect and less invasive. So is the Eastland Plaza one, but that's only on Mondays, but also a self-collect site.
Right. Okay. Thank you. Any other questions? Okay. Thank you, Dr. Park. We appreciate it very much. Okay, we're going to move on to our consent agenda. Are there any consent items that anyone needs to pull? Okay. Seeing none, I would entertain.
I'll make a motion to accept the consent calendar.
Before that, do we have any public comments on consent that we need to listen to beforehand?
No, we do not, Chair.
Okay. So we have a motion from Supervisor Villapudua.
Second.
And a second from Supervisor Patty. Cast your votes. Consent is approved 5-0. You. Okay, next up we have a public hearing regarding approval of Wilcox Road Specific Plan Amendment Number PA 2000077 and approval of site approval number PA 1900286 of Extra Lease LLC. And we have David Kwong, our Community Development Director, and Jennifer Jolly, our Principal Planner, here to present.
Morning, members of the board, chair, and members of the board. David Kwong, your director again. I think I'd like to start with, you do have before you a request by Mr. Eugene Giannichini for a request for a continuance for 30 days before you. And I think the stated reasons are something along the lines of public safety and just having received a notice of it. And what I wanted to do was inform you and the public that we had actually conducted 3 notices for this project from the standpoint of the environmental noticing, the Planning Commission recommendation, and then also finally this board meeting as well. I don't know specifically what other public safety considerations Mr. Giannini is referencing, but we do also have other folks, other departments that have reviewed this project in regard to perhaps traffic safety and things like that. So we have actually conducted the proper process for that as well. And I recommend that we continue to hold the hearing, but that request for continuance is before you this morning.
Okay. Any comments from the board or any request?
Is the applicant here?
Yes, Chair.
Yes. Mr. Hakem, would you like to come and speak just on the request for the continuance at this point, and then we'll move into the public hearing?
Thank you, Madam Chair and Supervisors. Mike Hakem, 3414 Brookside Road in Stockton. I'm here today to represent the property owner, Jim Nyland, who's with me. In talking to Jennifer Jolly with your planning department, it's my understanding they have confirmed that both the CHP office and Mr. Giannichini, that both parties each received all 3 of the required notices for this project. The first notice would have been last July for a notice of a new project. The second of the 3 would have been in August, notice of the Planning Commission hearing in September, and then of course the third would be the notice for this morning's hearing. And to my knowledge, neither the CHP nor Mr. Giannichini ever contacted the planning department, or at least contacted my client to inquire regarding the amendment of the specific plan. Mr. Giannichini is a lawyer, and he knows that his discussions with the CHP regarding the status of Wilcox Road cannot bind the county to do or not do something. Whatever discussions Mr. Giannichini references in his email between he and the CHP are limited to those 2 parties. They don't bind the county, and the county has full faith and credit to proceed with its jurisdiction this morning. I've been practicing law in San Joaquin County for about 45 years. In all of my years and all the requests for continuances, I've opposed 2 in 45 years. I normally would grant a continuance if someone needs time to prepare for a hearing. In this particular case, this would be a request that I don't support because the parties received all the required and adequate notice to prepare for the hearing. Having said that, the issues involved in this hearing are not complicated. They're pretty straightforward. You don't need a whole lot of time to prepare for the hearing for this matter. Planning Commission resolution speaks for itself, and we would respectfully request that the board proceed and hear the matter this morning, Madam Chair.
Thank you. I'm going to turn to County Council. Do we need a motion or just to move on with the public hearing after direction from the board if the board does not opt to grant the continuance?
If there's a desire to grant the continuance, the motion would be appropriate. If there is not a desire to grant the continuance.
Okay. All right. Seeing none from the board, we are going to move on with the presentation then and launch into the public hearing.
Okay, thank you, Chair and members of the board. Again, what I'm going to do is defer to our principal planner, Jennifer Jolly, but this is basically a request to remove a paper street, a 42-year-old paper street, and make a site that's viable in staff's recommendation and as the Plan Commission recommended too. That's the short summary of it. But now I'm going to give it over to Jennifer to go into details.
Thank you, Director Kwong. I'm not nearly as short, so I will try to make this as quick as possible, but give you all the information. So thank you, Chair Miller and members of the board. The project consists of two applications. One is a specific plan amendment, and the other is a site approval application. The site approval is for a facility to sell and lease semi-truck trailers. The project's going to also include the construction of a 9,200 square foot building for the use of an office and maintenance shop. And then the remainder of the site will support parking for up to 622 trailers. The project site's a 20-acre parcel located between Cherokee Road and Waterloo Road, east of State Route 99 in Stockton. The parcel is bisected by an 80-foot wide easement reserved by the Wilcox Road Specific Plan, which was adopted in 1978. It was for future road development, and as currently approved, no other construction is permitted in this easement. The applicant's requesting to amend the specific plan by removing the Wilcox Road section from his property to allow for this development. The general plan designation is general commercial, as well as the zoning being general commercial. The project site's currently undeveloped. The proposed amendment to the specific plan will remove the reserved easements. It's depicted here with the blue lines, which will then allow development for the full 20-acre parcel. Access to the site is proposed from the south end of the site, from Wilcox Road. The surrounding uses are residential to the east and industrial to the north, south, and west. This is a copy of the site plan for the Wilcox Road. Wilcox Road starts at a cul-de-sac north of Cherokee Road. The sections outlined in red have not been constructed and are the sections proposed for removal and abandonment. The developed sections start again south of the project parcel and continue south across Waterloo Road, joining up with Piccoli Road, and then it returns back to Waterloo. This is a copy of the site plan showing where the trailer sales and leasing facility, how it will be developed. As you can see on the right side of the site plan, there's a terminus with a turnaround at the end of Wilcox Road as currently developed. The specific plan for Wilcox Road was adopted in 1978, and to date, all sections of that planned road have been constructed with the exception of the two sections that are addressed with this proposed amendment. In 2004 or 2005, applications to change the general plan map and zoning of that particular site were proposed from a different developer. The underlying project at that time was a major subdivision, which, if approved, would have resulted in the construction of a portion of the planned Wilcox Road on the parcel as it fit into the design of the subdivision. However, ultimately, the change from commercial to residential was denied, and no other applications have been filed for this parcel until this current application. The Department of Public Works requires an amendment to the Wilcox specific plan prior to approval of the underlying project because construction is not permitted within the roadway easements. The Public Works Department has confirmed that these sections of the roads are no longer needed, nor are there any future plans for construction of these sections of the road. Before we went to Planning Commission, we did receive a letter from the Waterloo Murata Fire District voicing some opposition to the amendment, stating that the proposed road will impede their ability to have a rapid response into the properties off of Cherokee Road for future development in that area. However, the Department of Public Works did respond in writing in a letter dated August 19th, stating that there are no plans to build this section for Wilcox Road and that the fire district's ability to provide service will not be affected by this amendment. We did not receive an updated letter from the fire district, but we have also not received any additional comments from the fire district in the last 2 months. Here's some pictures just to give you an idea of what's out there right now. This is looking north from Waterloo Road where Wilcox begins. This photo is taken at the current northern terminus of Wilcox Road. It's about 1,260 feet north of Waterloo Road. In the background beyond this fence is the 20-acre parcel. If the amendment to the specific plan is approved, the Department of Public Works is requiring the applicant to construct a turnaround, as I stated on the site plan, for trucks at this terminus. This photo was taken at the south end of the project parcel, looking at the west side of the parcel, and in the background are the industrial developments that front the Ad-Art Road, existing Ad-Art Road, where there's a small portion of a road being requested for abandonment as well. I have a lot of pictures, so. This photo is taken at the south end of the project parcel, looking at the east side. This is where it abuts to a residentially zoned property where there will be a masonry wall erected between the residential area and the project site. And finally, this picture was taken from the north side of Cherokee Road, looking south at the 20-acre parcel. This is where the 80-foot easement reserved for Wilcox Road comes out onto Cherokee. It is recommended that the Board of Supervisors adopt the mitigated negative declaration and approve specific plan amendment number 200077 with the findings contained in the board packet. In addition, we recommend that you approve the site approval number PA 1900268 with the findings and the conditions of approval contained in the board packet. And this concludes staff's presentation. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any questions for staff? Supervisor Wynn?
Two quick questions. First, I assume both of you had a conversation with one of the neighbors in regards to the wall. Was she satisfied with your discussion?
Through the chair, board member, I actually spoke to her as late as almost 6 o'clock last night. She might be on the line, but in relationship to the wall, I think it was both an aesthetic question and how far she could see the truck trailers parked as well as the building. And given the distance between the back of her property line and the wall at 6 feet high and where the building is proposed, I think she's satisfied, but I think she's on the line. She'll be able to confirm that. To the extent that she would rather have a higher wall, that's not what the standard allows for. The standard allows for 6 feet, and given the distance between her back property line and the buildings and the trailers, I believe that mitigated the concern.
Thank you. Second question is, you had mentioned Waterloo Murata and their concern with access. Since they filed their concern, was that before the Planning Commission meeting or after the Planning Commission meeting? I assume it's before, correct?
Through the chair, yes, it was before Planning Commission. And the chief at the time said that he was bringing forward the board's concerns and that he would not be able to retract any of the comments without going forward back to his board and reporting. However, it's been over 2 months at this point, and we've never received an additional comment.
But also, you've noticed them, correct, for the Planning Commission. So they clearly know that they had an opportunity, if they objected, to speak up at that particular meeting, correct?
Correct.
Thank you.
Thank you. Supervisor Elliott?
Thank you, Chair. It seems there are just two concerns here on this. One is that this road apparently doesn't, there are no current plans to build this road. Is that correct?
That's correct. It's been placed, adopted since 1978, but there are still no plans in the future to build this road. I think Public Works can confirm that too.
Right. So then assuming that this road never gets built, then from what I understand, the Public Works has also determined, or was it Community Development that determined that there would also be no safety concern that would arise from not building that road in terms of access to the property or the surrounding areas.
Yes, it would be the Department of Public Works did confirm that.
Right. So we've got no safety concerns and no plans to build the road anyway.
Correct.
Correct. They use the existing streets that are there today.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you. If there's no other questions at this time, then I'm going to open the public hearing.
Thank you, Madam Chair and Supervisors. Mike Hakem. I have a few brief comments. Again, Mr. Nyland is here with me in the audience. As you know from the board letter, the original Wilcox Road specific plan was adopted in 1978. That's over 42 years ago, and it's never been completed because, one, it's not required, and two, it would be inappropriate to do so at this time. The county would basically have to condemn the property from my client to put the road through, and that's not something that the Planning Department or the Public Works is in favor of for obvious reasons at this time. I do want to comment on your board letter at page 537. The Department of Public Works position is very clear, and I'm going to read this and quote it. The Wilcox Road specific plan was part of a larger plan to develop the areas surrounding the project parcel into a business park. In the 40 years since the specific plan was adopted, development in the area has shifted away from a business park to include commercial and residential developments. Because of this, the proposed amendment to remove these sections of Wilcox Road does not hinder development. I want to comment briefly on the CHP issue. They have direct access on Waterloo Road, and I went out there Friday morning and drove the area myself to get a better sense of what impact, if any, this may make on them. Basically, it was alluded to in the opponent's letter that there'd be a safety issue if the road did not go through. And again, I drove the area last Friday morning. The CHP office at its current location is 1 minute from their corner to Highway 99. So it's basically 1 minute at speed, at my speed, to go from the CHP corner to Highway 99 to access the freeway. If by chance the Waterloo ramp at 99 is unavailable for any reason, and you couldn't use 99 and Waterloo, then you could also go east to Cherryland, north to Cherokee, and then west to the Cherokee ramp. This alternate route is approximately 3 minutes at my speed from the CHP office around Cherryland up to Cherokee and west to 99. So it doesn't appear to be any disadvantage to the CHP. It's my understanding that Jennifer Jolly had a conversation with the CHP, and I think the upshot of it was if we had an issue, we would have written you a letter, and you don't have a letter from us. So I'll paraphrase that. Jennifer certainly can speak to that issue. She had the direct conversation. Moving quickly in closing, the underlying project is for a site approval, as indicated in the staff report, to develop a 20-acre parcel for leasing and selling semi-trailers and trucks with jobs, economic development, and taxes for all concerned. As you know from the board letter, we have a positive staff recommendation. We have a 5-0 positive Planning Commission recommendation. In closing again, there are 56 conditions of approval for mitigation. We've agreed to all of those. The findings have been approved by staff and the Planning Commission, and we respectfully request your support this morning. I am interested in hearing if there is a speaker relative to the neighbor. I would be interested in hearing from her, and I have some thoughts on that subject if it would be appropriate at a later time. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Are there any questions from the board of Mr. Hakem? Supervisor Wynn?
Mr. Hakem, the plan presents 622 trailers. Is that correct?
I'm sorry, I couldn't hear you very well.
622 trailers. Is that what the plan is for, as far as on the site? Is that correct?
I'd have to look that up. If you give me 30 seconds.
I think that property owner acknowledged that is the number. And the reason I bring that up is I think one of the things that obviously the board is always interested in is economic development. I don't know what the tax on those trailers would be, but I would assume, we're talking about semi-trailers, is that correct? We're probably looking at, what, $5,000, $6,000 per trailer? I mean, you know better than I do, but $5,000 or $6,000 per trailer by 622, that's a large figure, certainly for economic development for this county and for certainly the service we provide. So again, I don't agree we're not Mr. Hakem, because I think we really need to look as a board in regards to opportunities to provide these type of businesses which benefit not only the property owner and the business owner, but certainly the county in general. So that was my question.
You are correct, Chairman Wynn. It is 622. You are correct.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions of Mr. Hakem? Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. Then at this point, I would ask if we have any comments from the public, anyone wishing to address the board?
So, Madam Chair, I did, like I said, receive those two requests from Mr. Giannacini that I'll go ahead and read into the record now.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Giacchini writes, I would like to ask for a continuance of the board hearing on specific plan amendment number PA 2000077 and site approval number 1900286 of LBJ2 LLC to amend Wilcox Road specific plan. I've just been made aware of this matter and would need additional time to prepare comments. When I sold property to the regional office of the Highway Patrol, it was with the understanding that Wilcox Road would extend north to Cherokee Road, therefore providing both north and south exit from their facility for security and safety reasons in case access would be blocked for any reason. I spoke with the captain today, and he also was concerned about these changes, but just became aware of these possible changes to Wilcox Road. I would like to request at least a 30-day continuance to further review this matter, since it definitely could affect public safety and compromise the Highway Patrol access for exits from their facility. Mr. Giannacini went on to send a second email that writes, I just sent comments yesterday regarding the hearing on November 3rd, but I also wanted to point out that the Stockton Regional Highway Patrol office sits just east and north of the flood zone, and that Wilcox at Waterloo Roads are in the flood zone. If a flood should occur in the area, the Highway Patrol might not have an exit out of their office for emergency or any services. When they purchased the location for me, it was their understanding from reviewing maps at the time that they would eventually have exit access to the north to Cherokee Road and Adart Roads, which are not in the flood zone. Their north access to their facility is not in the flood zone and could only be used to proceed north in an emergency situation. Limiting their access does not appear reasonable or prudent. Again, I'm requesting a reasonable 30-day continuance to consider all options that might affect emergency services. And Madam Chair, that concludes the written comments that I've received.
Okay, thank you. If there are no other comments at this time, then I'm going to close the public hearing. And I'm going to bring it back to the board for any final questions or comments.
Madam Chair, I just make a motion to approve as recommended by staff.
Prior to taking a vote, and strictly for the purposes of full disclosure, I would just want to state that both the owner and Mr. Hakam, his representative, have in the past supported several of my campaigns. They have not approached me on this issue, and we have not had any outside discussion on this matter. So we have a motion from Supervisor Patty.
I'll second the motion.
And we have a second from Supervisor Villaputra. Cast your votes. And that is approved 5-0. Thank you, everyone. At this time, I want to announce that our first general government discussion on homeless housing assistance and prevention program round 1 awards has been pulled by the county administrator's office. We're going to bring this back at a later date. We had some staffing complications in terms of the presentation, so we're going to bring that back. It'll come back to the board. Time to move on to our second discussion item, which is a discussion of alleged violations of Board of Supervisors Code of Ethics. I'm going to turn this over to County Counsel to present, please.
Thank you. Matters brought before the board. Recommendation that the board discuss whether a violation of the Code of Ethics has occurred and the appropriate remedy. This letter also requests that the board provide direction to council regarding processing of complaints of ethics code violations public. On October 20th, during the public meeting of the Board of Supervisors, Supervisors Wynn and Patty engaged in a verbal exchange where, responding to a statement made by Supervisor Wynn, Supervisor Patty said, I'm not sure if you are just bloviating. I'm not sure what his point was when he was bloviating, to which Supervisor Wynn responded, I'm surprised you understand what bloviating means. On October 21st, Supervisor Patty sent an email attached to the board letter as Exhibit 1, identifying or implying that Supervisor Wynn had violated Article 1, Section 4E of the Code of Ethics, which states, I conduct myself in a courteous and respectful manner at all times during the performance of my official county duties, and asked that the board have a discussion of possible actions to be taken against Supervisor Wynn for his insulting words. Additionally, on October 21st, Mr. Frank Gallardo emailed the County Counsel's office CCing all of the board members, stating that he wanted to file an ethics complaint related to Supervisor Wynn's comments. Stated that he wanted to file an ethics complaint against Supervisor Miller, also stating, why is a state assembly candidate running a meeting talking about problems directly impacting the state race? She should have recused herself and was, referring to myself, that I should have given her that advice. Article 4, Section 2 states that if a board member, department head, county administrator, or county council becomes aware of improper behavior by any board member, it will be shared with the county administrator and all board members. Mr. Gallardo's act of sending his communication to the board eliminated the need for council to share that information with members. Because the board has been made aware of Supervisor Patty's allegations of a violation of the Code of Ethics, it's appropriate for the board to discuss that matter, adopt findings or a determination regarding the alleged violation, and take appropriate action. As to the allegations regarding Supervisor Miller, Mr. Gallardo provided insufficient factual basis to support allegations against Supervisor Miller for a Code of Ethics for chairing the meeting. The Board of Supervisors rules specify the duties of the chair of the board, which include chairing all board meetings. The meeting referenced by Mr. Gallardo was not a, quote, meeting talking about problems directly impacting the assembly race. Rather, it was a regularly scheduled meeting of the Board of Supervisors. The discussion that Mr. Gallardo appears to be referencing, not a discussion about problems directly impacting the assembly race. Supervisor Patty had asked that a discussion item be added to the agenda for the meeting titled Discussion of the November 3rd, 2020 General Election Integrity in San Joaquin County, with recommendation that following the discussion, the board will provide direction to staff to address the integrity of the November 3rd, 2020 general election in San Joaquin County as needed. All of the 6 bulleted examples provided by Supervisor Patty were phrased in general terms, and none identified any specific race. Members of the Board of Supervisors owe a duty to the public not to recuse themselves from consideration of a matter unless they have a legal conflict of interest. A generalized discussion of concerns expressed by the public with the upcoming election does not create a legal conflict of interest. As to the council processing ethics complaints from the public, council owes an ethical duty to the County of San Joaquin as the client acting through the Board of Supervisors. An expectation by the public that council will investigate or respond to allegations of ethics code violations from the public has the potential to create at least the perception of a legal conflict of interest between county council and the county. Because the Code of Ethics is intended to be an internal tool for addressing conduct, because of the potential for creation of an ethical conflict of interest, council recommends that and requests direction from the board that citizens complaining of violations of the Code of Ethics be directed to the civil grand jury, a body that exists for the express purpose of acting as a watchdog over the conduct of public agencies.
Thank you. Okay, so what is on here is a discussion of whether a violation of the Code of Ethics occurred and any appropriate remedy. And then we are also being asked to provide direction to County Council regarding processing complaints from citizens, as opposed to complaints coming from board members, internal complaints. So I will turn to the board. Comments, discussion? Supervisor Patty?
Sure. Thank you, Madam Chair. I have a question through the chair. I'd like to ask County Council, who decides if a violation of the Code of Ethics has occurred?
Board of Supervisors does.
Got it. So I'm a little bit confused. It seems to be a bit of a double standard, and perhaps you can clarify for me. On 4/23/19 in the agenda, and I have it over here, we have a discussion item listed as discuss violation of Code of Ethics as it related to an alleged, a possible Code of Ethics violation by me. But what's interesting, in today's agenda on 11/3/2020, we have a discussion item listed as discussion of alleged violation of Supervisors' Code of Ethics. So have you concluded in today's letter that this is just an alleged, and in the past you concluded that I was guilty because we were going to discuss the violation, not alleged? You didn't use the word alleged. You used the word discussion of violation of Code of Ethics, which by interpretation, one is to proceed with what's the procedure of what when somebody is guilty of something. And in this instance, we're proceeding on an alleged, as if it's just very precarious, when we clearly know that Supervisor Wynn, in this Code of Ethics that was exalted by our Chair Miller and then Chair when this was adopted, and Supervisor Wynn, much to the dismay of others on the board at the time, but it says in this right here under Section 4, respect for fellow elected or appointed officials, staff, and the public. And if you drop down to E, it says, I conduct myself in a courteous and respectful manner at all times during the performance of my official county duties. Now that right there determines the parameters of, in my opinion, a violation of Code of Ethics, which is why I contacted your office to follow through. But yet you follow through with it as an alleged. So could you clarify for me?
Well, the reason that I say that it's alleged, because the question is whether or not Supervisor Wynn's question of, I'm surprised that you understand what bloviating means, rises to the level of a violation of that section. That's a determination for the board. I didn't make in 2019, I have never made determinations about whether or not a violation has occurred. That is a decision for the Board of Supervisors.
But that's not how you presented it. It was presented on the board on the 23rd of April. It was presented as discuss violation of Code of Ethics as it related to me. Now, just to refresh our memories on this, there were 3 allegations brought against me. One was retracted without apology, by the way, because you, County Council, had made the assumption from an ambiguous statement as you determined it. And you later retracted it once you had the courtesy of actually doing an investigation and speaking with me about that statement. Again, you retracted it without apology. Now, there were 2 other supposed violations, but they cancel each other out. One was stated that I was giving preferential treatment to Dr. Malo, and the other accused that Dr. Malo wasn't a candidate, so my statement of support was misleading. So those 2 cancel each other out. But you presented it, and it seems like a bias or a partial, maybe perhaps an agenda. If I'm misinterpreting, please clarify. But you presented it as discuss violation of Code of Ethics. So you determined that there was a violation of Code of Ethics in the agenda when it relates to me, but as it relates to Supervisor Wynn, am I reading this wrong? It seems like there's a double standard here.
No, Supervisor Patty. I'd never made a determination that you violated the Code of Ethics.
Based on what I read, that's exactly, and based on what was presented in the heading of the discussion item, it was.
Well, I don't have that document in front of me. I'm sure you're quoting it correctly, but it's a matter of semantics, and I'm telling you that I have never made a determination that any supervisor has violated the Code of Ethics. That is a determination reserved for the Board of Supervisors, as these are your rules, and it's up for you to determine whether or not individual conduct rises to the level of a violation.
Well, I have the documents here. One of them says, discuss violation of code of ethics, which sounds very ominous. Next one says, discussion of alleged violation of Board of Supervisors code of ethics. So there seems like a double standard going on here. I want to note that for the record, and I don't appreciate it. Now, the matter at hand, and wherever we decide to go with it, at one point we talked about maybe revising. We talked about striking the code of ethics and replacing it, not getting rid of it, because we all have code of ethics by the state that we have to abide by. But we talked about getting rid of this. This was a document that Chair Miller exalted as being carefully constructed and carefully put together with multiple levels of input from CSAC, which factually never happened. CSAC's never had a code of ethics discussion or breakout session. But this is all exalted as the code of ethics that we must abide by. Then we have Supervisor Wynn, who has the audacity to insult my intelligence and the audacity to insult my education in a board meeting. We're having this discussion when I very accurately identify that Supervisor Wynn tends to bloviate and talk endlessly about something without even perhaps having a point. So that's my opinion. I'm entitled to it. I shared it. It wasn't an attack. Bloviate is not a demeaning term. It just defines a person's course of action when discussing. So to me, the big issue is, what are we to do? And I don't care if we do anything, but we are actually following this code of ethics as required and as exalted to be a great code of ethics, that we are to discuss the violation and discuss, our code states, if a board member violates the board code of ethics, the board shall take immediate action, which we are doing, including a public discussion, which we are doing at the next possible board meeting. Again, that's happening. And or move to censure board member found to be in violation. So the question is, do we have a code of ethics? Is it worth nothing? It was exalted as carefully crafted and a document that we must utilize. It's going to make everybody accountable here in San Joaquin County. So I'm going to ask this board how you feel about this, because apparently this may or may not be applicable when there is a violation or an alleged violation as coming from county council. So, Madam Chair, that's my statement I'd have on this. I'd like to hear where other boards are, but I think that Supervisor Wynn's comments were uncalled for. It was demeaning, it was degrading, and it was an insult to me, an elected representative of my district here in San Joaquin County.
Other board members like to weigh in? Supervisor Wynn?
Thank you, Madam Chair. In 2015, a previous board adopted the Code of Ethics, which was intended simply to lay out some ground rules in regards to the way we conduct ourselves as a board member. It was not intended necessarily to be a gotcha or a political tool. It was simply a guide, as most professional organizations, if not all, whether it be attorneys or doctors or law enforcement, they all have a code of conduct, code of ethics, by which they strive to follow. At that particular time, there was a lot of discussion. Those who did not agree, who argued that there are other remedies in law that would deal with most violations, which is true to some extent, but there is a lack of specificity in regards to how we, as a body, perform our duties. Since that time, there have been several allegations made over time by which my perception is, for the most part, have been politically motivated, which was the argument presented by those who opposed it, that it would be used as a weapon. Secondly, I think that as an elected body, and since the people put us in these positions, and there's really nobody but the voters who have the ability to fire us, that there should be some semblance of a process or procedure or at least rules that we would hold ourselves to that standard. I would have to admit that there have been times where I believe that some violations have occurred over the years. I have withheld any kind of complaint or filing of a violation because my philosophy for the most part has been we're all elected and the public really holds us accountable. And therefore, I've allowed members, and even before I was on the Board of Supervisors, to conduct themselves and let the public be the final judge. So the ethics code is there primarily as a guide to at least remind us of what our responsibilities are. In regards to the 2019 complaint, that was a little bit different. And yes, I did bring that to the board on the agenda because it was brought to our attention from County Counsel, who I believe is the expert in regards to legal matters for this board and for county members, that the actions of Supervisor Patty were in conflict to our code of ethics and therefore presented a document to that point. And subsequently, through a full hearing, we discussed it. And so I did it because somebody had to do it. I didn't do it because I disliked Supervisor Patty, but it was just part of the process that we adopted, which is still in place. The other part of that is that during that discussion, there was no action taken against Supervisor Patty. There was some discussion in regards to the propriety and what happened, but it was over, and we moved on. However, there seems to be a concerted effort to use our code of ethics by some political entities to attack certainly Chair Miller and to some degree maybe myself, but that's part of the job, and I accept that. My comments in regards to previously, which Supervisor Patty took exception to as far as bloviating, and it isn't the first time he's made comments. He's made comments about, taking too long and drawing out the meetings. And I guess my concern is, first of all, we are here to serve the public, no matter how long it takes. And I always take complaints seriously, and I will endeavor to be more brief in my comments. However, when I read over the staff reports, questions arise. Sometimes I call the department and ask them before our meeting. But then there are other questions that I think the public needs to hear the answer to. So I do ask questions, but my point is to clarify the issue, to ensure that not only us as a board, but certainly the public is completely aware of all the details of why we make certain decisions. And I have received comments over the years that they appreciate that because it gives them a better understanding. The other part of this is that by virtue of our discussion, I would agree with Supervisor Patty that my comment was inappropriate. But I also can say, and I'm not defending myself, but I would also say that I am troubled at times by questions or allegations made, or as just happened here in this meeting, is what I believed was attacking our county council over his wording of an agenda item without at least questioning him before this meeting as to his intent or possibly any reason that he dealt with these issues differently, as opposed to put it on public display in a very accusatory fashion, which I think is discourteous, and I think it's inappropriate. So the bottom line is that I acknowledge, in fact, I will read a portion of the Code of Ethics, which is Article 1(3)(f), and it says, I take responsibility for my actions, and then the conclusion is, even when it is uncomfortable to do so. I take responsibility for my actions. I take responsibility for the comment. It was inappropriate and unprofessional, and I would agree. However, at the same time, I do feel that Supervisor Patty has a tendency to be very aggressive, almost to a point of intimidating at times, and especially when a lot of the questions or even accusations that he makes here in the board meetings could be handled more appropriately, privately, so those who are questioned can have the opportunity to explain, as opposed to putting them on the spot to answer cold, which oftentimes, as Mr. Miles says, he doesn't have the documents, so he can't review and then respond correctly. So again, as far as the action and the complaint by Supervisor Patty, I have to say that I agree, and I should not have made that comment, but I do not take back any of the other comments I make in regards to his behavior, and I think it's inappropriate for him to attack County Council today over something that is totally irrelevant to this particular hearing. So with that, thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Anyone else? Supervisor Elliott?
Thank you, Chair. I have been one who has said from the beginning that this code of ethics may create more turmoil than it does good. I think I was the original one to describe it as a gotcha list because I thought it just went into way too much detail in terms of providing a list. Do this, don't do that. Which then provides the basis for this continual back and forth here and sniping at each other that has occurred. I think that acting appropriately should be fairly simple for anyone who consciously acts with professionalism, collegiality, and just simple good manners. And it perplexes me as to why some people on this dais continue to take shots at each other and attempt to belittle their peers. And I would have to say that this particular issue that was brought up today is not the first time we've heard this kind of thing here on the dais. Not the first time we've heard this kind of thing from Supervisor Wynn as well. But I don't think that rises to the level of something that requires a censure by the board. I just think that we should all remember that that we're not really running against each other here. We're not campaigning against each other. We all represent our districts. And we should just stop and think about the way we make comments and what we're trying to do. You know, we should all remember that what we're trying to do here is we're trying to do the county's business in a way that provides for the most good for the most number of people in the county. We're trying to make the county a better place, and we're trying to conduct our discussions in a way that will lead us in that direction and not get us diverted into personal attacks. So that's my point. Yeah, sometimes some inappropriate things are said, but let's just remember that we're here to conduct the county's business, and we should consider our comments in that light and make our points in that manner rather than devolving into personal attacks. That's my comment.
Thank you. Supervisor Villalpudua.
Thank you, Chair Miller. I just want to say that, you know what, I see these code of ethics violations on the agenda, and I cringe because I hate them. And I think it's unnecessary. We're all adults, and we're part of a team, and we're teammates, and we got to stick together, and we have to provide the best service we can for our county and our districts. So I just think that these are just a waste of time. I think that we're all adults, and we should stick together and work with one another more than attack each other. That's all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you. I agree with Supervisors Elliott and Villaputua. Supervisor Elliott, in 2015, when we discussed this, you made the statement then that you felt that that having a code of ethics and setting out some specific goals for our behavior could be used politically and become a negative thing. And at the time, I disagreed with you strongly and said that I didn't believe that anyone that had received the trust of their voters in their district and assumed the honor of serving as a supervisor would abuse that trust. I want to apologize to you because you were right and I was wrong. We have seen demonstrated over the last several years that it can indeed become a negative. And I agree with you wholeheartedly that it should not be. That was never the intent. You and I have disagreed robustly on quite a few items over the last 6 years, and yet you and I have never made personal comments or attacks against one another. And I believe that our back and forth on issues has been a positive thing for the voters and the residents of San Joaquin County to hear, that they can elect people that will represent different points of view and that we will work together to do the business of the county. In regards to the April 2019 meeting, I agree that it really doesn't have anything to do with what we're here talking about today. Were very different items. The discussion that day was about the fact that the behavior of weighing in on a recruitment process outside of the closed session discussions and not in alignment with the decisions that the full board had made could jeopardize our staff's ability to do their jobs properly and could jeopardize the county's ability to conduct positive recruitments in the future. What we're here talking about today has nothing to do with that. I looked up the definition of the word bloviate, and the definition that Supervisor Patty included in his letter conveniently left out the second part of the definition. The definition in Oxford refers to bloviate as to talk at length, comma, especially in an inflated or empty way. And if you go on to read a large number of definitions of the word, they are all very negative. It means to go on and on, usually in a pompous way, blowing some serious hot air. And specifically as it relates to politicians, talking a lot and saying very little and talking pompously, to speak a lot in an annoying way as if you are very important. The one thing they all have in common is they're very negative descriptions of speaking. I don't believe this rises to the level of an ethical violation. I think it was unfortunate. It was a conversation, a discussion that got overly heated. In my mind, Supervisor Wynn, after twice being referred to as bloviating, responded. I don't think any of the comments should have been made. So I agree with Supervisors Villaputua and Supervisor Elliott. We've had the discussion. We've met the requirements. I don't think any further action needs to be taken by this board, in my opinion.
Madam Chair?
Yes.
If I may, I do need to note for the record that we have received a request for comment on this particular item, if you'd like me to read that for the record.
Absolutely.
Okay. It was submitted by Alex Alaferis, who writes, Dear board members, I'm amazed how Supervisor Wynn concentrates his energy on personal attacks against a fellow supervisor. We, the taxpayers, hire Supervisor Wynn to make sure he holds department heads like San Joaquin County Register of Voters accountable. What about to work with other supervisors so we can end the COVID lockdowns? We have a huge homeless and drug addiction problem in the county. Where is the coordination? I'm sick of this division. I want to see more action to hold departments within the county accountable. There's a lot of work to do than to waste time on personal attacks. And that concludes the comments.
Thank you very much. Supervisor Patty?
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. If we wrap this up in a couple moments here. I agree with Supervisor Villaputua and Supervisor Elliott and all of us. And Madam Chair, I'm glad to see that you've changed your position from what you asserted was a very carefully crafted and a good document for us to adopt. And I think it's wonderful. I really do. I applaud that. I'm following exactly what we are supposed to do according to the Code of Ethics and I was insulted. So not only did Supervisor Wynn not apologize right then and there as he could have, but I do appreciate that he recognizes that he made a mistake and shouldn't have used that terminology, and that's fine. As for the bloviate and all but negative definitions, they might be negative, but they also might be accurate. So I have a question. Supervisor Wynn's questioning my public display, as he put it, as it relates to having discussions like this not done in private, similar to what he did when we had the ROV discussion. He was assuming, he asserted that that should have been done through the CAO's office when, in fact, I disagree. It's the public that was crying out for some answers. It was not something to be done privately. It was something that should have been done in public. So just like this discussion, it's a public discussion. As for attacking county council, absolutely contrary to his belief of this being done privately, these agenda items that I've shared, they are published. That's public record. Public record is discussions of a violation from me. Public record is a discussion of an alleged violation against someone else. So while all of these documents that Supervisor Wynn is referencing, or the subject matter, is public, it is proper for it to be discussed in public, not in private. So that'll clarify that, if you will. But, you know, I do want to get to the bigger point. It seems like there's a double standard when it comes to the ethics code. On October 6th of 2020, we were told by County Council at a September 15th regular board meeting that an investigation was being conducted regarding possible ethics violation by a member of the body, of this body. And the matter would be agendized and a conclusive report would be given on October 6th. I'm interested to hear the findings. I'm yet to even hear that. Interestingly enough, Supervisor or Chair Miller, I would state on record that in our last October meeting, you accused me of twice bringing up ethics code violations against you. I don't know where those are. You said twice I've brought ethics code violations against you. That statement in and of itself is a violation of our code of ethics because it's blatantly false and misleading. Only one time when you falsely accused me of wanting to create a slush fund, which I never proposed, did I bring up the attention to the board and through the county council's office. Your statement about a slush fund was blatantly false and warranted a discussion because it actually was not anything that I proposed. So, you know, we seem to have a double standard where Supervisor Miller uses a building for her own public gain in an election that's against the FPPC's rules. I have case files of exactly the same actions, but county council decides that's not a violation of our ethics code to use a public facility for personal gain. So, you know, we need to amend our code of ethics, but we also need to have the same level of accountability for everybody if it's going to be brought up against me, whether it be in the past or in the future. So, I don't believe any further action needs to happen. I believe this discussion is robust. I think this discussion is helpful and it's beneficial to where we might actually go so that a code of ethics does not violate a person's First Amendment rights, like as in the Dr. Amalo case, and it doesn't become a little an issue of contention to bring against each other when things like insults, like Supervisor Wynn did to me, maybe that's not going to be in the next code of ethics that we could adopt in the board. So, I do appreciate that we had this discussion. It's great to maybe air out some of these things. We don't have much dialogue behind the closed doors, so unfortunately some of these things need to be aired out in public, especially when they are oftentimes laid out in public. So with that, Madam Chair, I conclude, and I don't know that we need any further action or any further discussion. Thank you.
There were 2 charges last year that were investigated that you brought against me. The first one was investigated by County Council, and it was determined that there was not a violation. And you instructed him at that time that you did not want to bring it forward for a discussion to the board. You then immediately leveled another charge against me and insisted that it be investigated by an outside investigator because you didn't feel that County Council could conduct an objective investigation. At expense to the county, that was investigated against me, and it was also determined that it was not a violation. At that point in time, you instructed County Council again that you did not want it to come for a public discussion. I am the one that insisted that it come before this board because I felt it was important to note a beginning pattern of yours of launching these ethics violations, which were not violations. In regards to the photographs, I consulted with the FPPC, and I also consulted with a private attorney. The FPPC does not govern this specific incident, and the government elections code that does specifically includes language which eliminates a violation for campaign purposes which are incidental and do not result in any gain to the individual. This certainly rose to that. This was a photograph that was taken in 2017, has been available and in the public domain since then, and has never been raised as an issue by you or anyone else until the current election cycle. And it was raised by a well-known outside political agitator who writes for a website that you are often quoted on and you often utilize to level charges against me. So when you say that no further discussion is necessary, I would like to think that we won't have to have any more of these discussions. I feel the same way Supervisor Villaputua does when these continue to come forward and are completely baseless. So I would like to think that we could all conduct this county's business in a professional way. And I will also say that the one very glaring difference between all the other comments that have occurred here today is that everybody else has been willing to accept the points where they have taken responsibility for taking in new information. I will say that despite me now realizing that individuals can and will use our code of ethics improperly for political reasons, I still believe that having a code of ethics is important. It is, and it sets out aspirational goals for our behavior to hold ourselves accountable, and it says to the public that we will strive to model this behavior in conducting their business. I still believe that. Do I think improvements could be made to our code of ethics? Of course. All codes, all laws, all ordinances, they're living documents and they're constantly tweaked and improved and changed. That's the nature of our government. I hope that there will be positive discussion on our code of ethics, and it will indeed be improved for future use. So at this point, I think that we should move on to final comments from board members, and if not, then I would like to turn to County Council for announcing closed session.
Madam Chair, you had made a couple of statements I need to clarify, please. You had said, and you again reaffirmed, that I 2 times had pursued something. And you had conveyed something that I told County Council that I want to pursue and we need to do an investigation. If that's what County Council told you happened, that is a 100% blatant lie. That is a false misrepresentation from County Council, from anything I would have conveyed to him. There was one instance where you publicly said that I was proposing to do a slush fund, which is a blatant lie, nothing even close to what I proposed to do in my discussion and the presentation of the topic at the time. That was a blatant misrepresentation of truth. This is your opinion, and that's fine. You're entitled to it. It's okay. But I did not, I will state clearly, I did not on 2 occasions pursue anything. I brought up, I take umbrage to the fact that you, it's another big word, Supervisor Wynn, I do know the word umbrage. So I take offense to the assertion that I've pursued this on more than one time, and it's factually not correct. And if County Council has any documentation to refresh or change my memory, I'll openly apologize and recognize it, but I do not believe that's the case in any capacity. So I conclude with you, that's fine, we can wrap it up. In your assertion that I'm frequently quoted on 209 times, at times I might give a quote, but I don't use that as an attack or pursuit against you or anybody else. So that's, again, a misleading statement. But, I think we're done and we can move on.
County Council?
Board will meet in closed session on the items listed on the agenda. Announcements expected out of closed session.
Thank you. And with that, we are adjourned to November 17th at 9 a.m. in these chambers. you.